still on side ride me, baby. I ain't never gonna stop. Come on now, baby. Ride me straight to the top. Yeah, straight to the top.
Okay. Yeah, they are.
So we're gonna cue in here with the audio with the 1, 2, 3. All right. Bad ideas, good stories.
Yes. Number 6.
Number 6. Fuck, this is going fast.
They're doing it.
Yeah,
You guys are putting out a good pace, one a week.
we're
Right?
trying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's ambitious.
Well, it's more than we were anticipating. Like we just maybe one every 3 weeks, and it was like, we should probably just do this every week.
Well,
I enjoy it too much.
I think our original plan was to record one every week, but only release them every 2 weeks. But I'm such a tweaker, you know, that like as soon as I get something, I'm gonna have to edit it, fix it, and then I'm like, oh fuck it, just put it up. And then Dusty's like, okay, I'll get the audio up, and I'm like, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
So we're doing it every week.
It's a teeter-totter, right? We can both be on either end of it. We'll get to the middle eventually. So it'll be once a week, but one of us is going to be done one day, and one of us is going to take until the last fucking hour on the week, because that's how I do everything.
Yeah, and we're pretty ADD, both of us. So we this is the easy part,
Yeah.
but then the responsibility stuff that's attached to it is less easy. Yeah. So I'm Pat. That's Dusty.
I'm Jose.
That's
We have a guest today.
Yes.
It is Jose.
My brother from another mother.
Yes,
Yes.
very much so.
Yeah.
Well,
Co-workers
we should
and
start off with
buddies.
a little bit about the Jose.
Yeah.
Where you from? What you do? How'd you get here?
Where am I from? From here. I've been originally born in Winnipeg, but grew up here most of my life.
Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Really? What was that like?
It was just, I was literally born and we moved.
Oh, you just
So,
when
yeah.
you looked at it. I got you. Yeah. So it was wrapped up in a blanket and crying a bunch and shitting my pants. Yeah,
exactly.
That was
The standard,
Baby stuff.
2-month-old living.
Winnipeg. Okay, fair enough.
So yeah, I really don't remember. I've been back to Winnipeg a few times just for work-related stuff, but it's a completely new.
It's a great
experience
place.
every
I love Winnipeg.
Yeah, it's definitely glad we.
It's not that funny.
It's not that funny, yeah. I've had some adventures in Winnipeg. I don't
Oh,
know if
every time I
love
left, I did a guest spot there, and every time I left a place I was tattooing or eating or going for drinks, there was always somebody outside that looked like they were ready to jack me, like a real angry looking person. Winnipeg,
I
Winnipeg.
always say Winnipeg to me is like a bigger, dirtier Regina.
We love you, Winnipeg. We
it.
do.
We love you, Regina.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, even some of my friends that moved from Saskatchewan to go dance in Winnipeg, it's a different vibe. It's a totally different vibe.
Did you grow up in Saskatoon then?
Yes. So right after I was born, we moved, and my family was originally from Chile, and so we moved back there. And then I grew up there until about 6 or 7, and then that's when we moved here.
What years were these?
Oh, shit.
That would have been 80 to 86, 87, I guess.
Okay.
And then and then here ever since.
The Elf years.
Mm-hmm.
Alf was around.
Alf.
Yeah.
Cat eating Alf.
Cool. And now you do
And now I do tattoos with Patrick.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
for the
he's,
an
last
artiste.
8-9 years.
he's my ink bro. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He came to our shop and he had a part-time job, and we got on his case to quit doing a part-time job and commit to tattooing.
It was scary.
Well, man, sometimes you just gotta grab the bull by its horns,
What was the scary aspect of that?
The uncertainty, definitely.
Just stepping into something where you don't have a regular
Yeah.
9-to-5 schedule. You
Yeah,
gotta kind of do
exactly.
yourself. Yeah.
That guaranteed paycheck, you just show up, punch a clock, you got your guaranteed hours, guaranteed paycheck, exactly 2 weeks, this is coming,
No matter
And,
how much a job sucks, that level of fucking consistency is nice.
Yeah, and then going from that to, well, I might, do 2 tattoos this week. I might not do any. That hasn't happened in a while.
In our shop, we're all
that doesn't happen in a while. Yeah.
No.
I don't imagine that you got a lot of days where you're sitting around going, "Fuck, I wish someone would give me a call."
Oh, there were some when I first started, because usually it's seasonal too, right? People
Sure.
don't realize that, but November, December are usually kind of slower months.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started, there would be, I remember 1 week in December where there was nothing, not a consultation, no deposits, no 1 week of just sitting there.
Everybody's saving for Christmas, right?
Well, yeah, exactly.
January is when the gift certificates start rolling back
Yep,
in, but
yep.
December is ramen month.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that was a scary week. Where I'm like, this is why I can't quit.
But the thing is, we're independent contractors. Everybody at our shop, at least, they aren't employees. We all work for ourselves. So you only make money if you've worked for it. You don't get a salary, And I remember I was working at a porn store, and one day the radio didn't work. And I'd worked at these for a long time. I was at the end of my rope dealing with the clients and the content and stuff like that. And one day I went in and I'm like, fuck, I'm here for a whole shift, and there's going to be like 3 guys come in to rent movies, and that's about it. And I got tired of drawing all the time, and then I went to turn on the radio, and the stereo broke. And I'm like, that's it. I'm fucking tattooing for a living. I went and I locked the door. I stuck the keys through the mailbox. I called the answering machine. I'm like, oh, by the way, I quit. You can keep my check. The keys are on the floor. And I remember walking back home thinking, this is the sink or swim moment that I'm going to try and tattoo for a living. And, if I sink, then I guess I'll just go get another blue collar job. But because before I was, the porn store, before I was tattooing, basically I was self-taught. I was blue collar. Like, me and my brother, we were dishwashers. We loaded furniture onto trucks. We were the laborers. We didn't have a skill set. So tattooing was kind of a lifesaver and gave us a career. I don't know. How about you?
Same, pretty much the same. Yeah, dishwashing. I worked in a couple of retail stores, but the majority of my work experience was all blue collar stuff, construction. I did concrete repairs and renovations for a while, which sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And then before tattooing, I was working as a boiler guy doing maintenance, and
that would have had a future though.
That would have. It was a great job, union, pension, all that stuff. I hated it.
Yeah.
Absolutely hated it. Just brain numbing.
I feel like a lot of that kind of shit to me, like it's a great job, it's not great work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, unless you really, because I know dudes that just fucking love ratchets. You know what I mean? They just love fucking with socket sets. They love the feel of a crescent wrench. I don't give a fuck. I don't care about any of that. And like doing that kind of shit, like I don't enjoy the fucking tools you're doing. I don't give a fuck about the thing I'm working on generally if it's not mine. You know what I mean? So it's like doing it, because I've had to for years work on cars and bikes and stuff because they're mine and I can't pay somebody else to do it. I gotta fucking do it myself.
And there's a sense of accomplishment attached to doing
to
that.
some degree, but it's like I would rather just not have to fucking do it at all, And I think people get that misconstrued with me, especially where they're like, "Well, you know how to do this stuff." I'm like, no, I'm forced to do this stuff. That's not the same as knowing how
Or
to,
enjoying
or
it.
even fucking having an interest in it. Like I keep having to do it.
Want.
Yes, exactly. And that's how that work like that always worked out for me. Like I did like steel construction, which was for a short period of time, which was very good pay.
Yeah.
I couldn't give 2 fucks about the work. But there was guys I worked with that there was nothing they loved more than putting on a harness and climbing around on shit and doing that. And I'm like, I want to have that about this job, and I fucking don't. Like,
well, the construction stuff I didn't mind. Being like a laborer, you get to use your hands, building things, feeling that kind of sense of accomplishment. The boiler maintenance was literally about 5 hours of work that you had to stretch out into an 8-hour period. And a lot of it was just looking at gauges and hoping that one goes wonky so you can
find
adjust. Yeah,
something.
exactly. Some days I would literally
Purposely
go in.
sabotage.
I would go in and be like,
Fuck,
okay,
get
I
cameras
know
and
that
get
if I
it so you
put
see where
less
you're
chemicals in here, it's gonna, in about an hour or two, that gauge is gonna come down. So I'm just not gonna top off the chemical levels right now, so that I can have something to do in like an hour and a half.
so this is why people like poison their kids a little bit at a time, right? They're constantly sick, and they're always
They look like great
poor
parents.
Me. I'm always looking
Look at
after
what
the
you're
sick
caring
baby.
for my baby.
You don't have any kids, do you? Jose?
Munchausen syndrome.
yeah, there you go. You
What's
got
that
in the
called?
boiler room.
Munchausen?
Munchausen.
Yeah, that's a thing. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, that's a thing. Yeah,
Oh, Jesus.
Named
That
after
was-
Robert Munch, believe it or not.
that was me with my boiler.
No, it's not. Yeah. It's Robert Munchausen syndrome.
Yeah, that was me with that boiler.
Right on. Well, you got out just in time.
I
It's,
did.
That's dangerous.
So you're working at the bus
Yeah, the
depot,
bus depot. Yeah, with the Greyhounds and stuff.
and every once in a while, suspicious packages might come through, and
Yes. Yeah.
people ship all kinds of nefarious things through bus packaging.
all kinds of stuff.
Fair enough.
Yeah, things that you're not supposed to ship, but
Post officers saw that lots too.
Yeah, I
Post
guess,
office
right,
heard
yeah.
it, and you see all sorts of gnarly shit come through. But I would like to hear some stories because I feel like you have one. If you're gonna fucking reference it,
We work together. I've heard a couple good ones.
there were a few times where we had cops come down and be like, okay, so we need to borrow one of your work shirts because we're going to pretend to be one of you guys because we
you just popped yours off. Right? Take my
pretty much,
pants.
yeah. I'm like, oh, there you go.
I'll be over here at the coffee station.
Yeah, there's a guy coming in to pick up a package, and we know that it's drugs coming from BC, and so sure enough, in about an hour, the bus from BC would pull up, and there's big, tinfoil packages coming in.
Jesus, low key.
I'm
eh?
like, oh, I wonder what's in that.
It's all hungry man dinners.
Funny thing about that, so my family drinks a lot of yerba mate. It's like tea, and it comes in loose leaves, right? So
That
it
stuff
literally
is a zinger. It's a zinger.
Oh, it's good.
How do you spell it if you could find it?
Yerba, Yerba, and then mate, mate.
Yeah.
With the accent over the e. And it's tea, but it comes in loose leaves, right? So it literally comes in 1 kilogram tinfoil pouches. And my family,
Loose
the entire
leaves.
family drinks that stuff. So my mom orders it by the cases. So because I was working there, I'd get a discount on the shipping. And so she would get me to order it. So I would be getting
Bricks of
20 packages of tinfoil wrapped 1 kilogram pouches coming in.
And like you can't even easily explain that away just by opening one. No, it's fine. Look, it's just these loose leaves.
Right?
Here, put some in your mouth.
Yeah,
Give you
That's what
energy.
we were worried about. It'll give you energy. No, this is what we were looking for. Yeah.
Exactly. I bet it does. Where are you from?
Yeah, you're gonna want to cook it down before you use it, like a tea.
Right? Yeah, exactly. You boil it. And I did get a few weird looks from management a couple of times. And they're
Yeah,
like,
right.
So, what is that? And I explained it, and they're like, okay.
Yeah, right. Well, you gave me a bag one time, and we still might have some of it because it got me so frazzled, man.
That's great.
Well, you can use a French press. You just pour the leaves, just like a tea, and you press it down. And I put a little bit of honey in it. Holy, it's a zinger! Like, woo, ning, like more
lots of
than
caffeine
coffee.
into it?
I don't even know what it is, man.
It's different than caffeine, but it's just energizing.
Well, now I want this.
It's
That sounds
very
nice.
interesting. It's
It's,
very interesting.
I like it. It's actually better. Like I like it better than coffee because you don't get jittery, but you get wired. Like it
You
does-
get wired.
Yeah,
Get
it
awake.
kicks you in the pants.
Well, is it a Chilean
Ross.
tea or South American? Because I've never
South
heard of it.
American, it's mostly like it's huge in Argentina.
Oh, okay.
Where it's huge from, and that's where my family got kind of hooked on it, and then just kept the tradition going. Because you'll get it, like I said, it comes in the loose leaves, so then you get this little gourd, and you put the leaves in there, and then you have a straw. It's like a metal straw with a little filter on the end of it, and so you stick that in there, and then you pour your hot water in, sip it until you're out of water, and then you
And the
pass it
straw
to-
filters it.
Yeah,
Oh.
and it's supposed to be like a communal thing too. So I'd have some, and then
Kind of like a hookah, you share.
yeah. There's one server, so like I would be packing and pouring, take some, pass it to Pat, then he'd have some, he'd pass it to you, and it would just
Interesting.
well, I guess he'd pass it to us.
Is herpes a thing there?
You would think
Tea
right?
kills it.
Maybe the temperature. I don't
Birds-
know.
Yeah, right.
We've all got it.
Well, it's a metal straw.
Yeah.
the blisters are from the hot water.
I mean, a lot of them, the tip is copper, so it doesn't.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't hold virus.
Bacteria
Yeah,
and
that's
stuff.
interesting. That's interesting.
Because I'm assuming they had some problems.
Well, that's another thing. Like the USA and Canada, they banned. I think it's cocoa leaves or coca leaves, right? You
Yep.
can't order the coca plant into Canada. Which the farmers there, they just grab a leaf and chew on it, and
Yep.
it keeps them awake, and they do their work and da. But that's the traditional way of doing coca. But of course, somebody found that you can refine it into a white powder through like the ether or the gasoline or anything else. You refine it into a white powder, and then you can refine it into a hard rock. Well, it's the same thing as taking your sugar cane and chewing on your sugar cane when you're out and about working in the field versus refining it into a white powder and refining it into these crystals. So I really wish that we could have like legitimate, like, why can't we have a plant, a
Yeah.
coca plant?
And it would take so much, like, you wouldn't be able to order enough of the plant here to turn it into cocaine.
Yeah, I imagine because you
Well,
need
yeah, 'cause
fields,
it's
right?
the
Yeah.
production process, right, that you have an issue with. Like,
Yeah.
the plant itself is fine, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you start using it in those ways.
And it's a legitimate medicinal plant because it also people use it for toothaches because it numbs the gums and stuff like that. It gives you energy and numbs the gums.
I was in Peru
Good for
with one of my
dancing, too.
cousins, and the elevation there is so much like prairie kid is not used to elevation, period. And we were in Peru going on the Machu Picchu hike, which was almost a week of just like hiking and camping
Really?
through the mountains with I can't remember. I think it's like 6,000 feet of elevation or something.
Do you
It's-
have to do it
it's
by
crazy.
camping? You can't just do it as like a day trip or
No,
anything?
no, it's
Oh.
way too long.
I'd be
Yeah.
scared of jaguars.
Yeah, there's all kinds of weird noises up there. And when we were going, one of the villagers was like, "You guys aren't from here, hey?" We're like, "No, we speak the language, but no, we're not from here." And they're like, "Oh, the elevation is gonna fuck you up. Like you're gonna have a hard time breathing. You're gonna get dizzy. Here's some coca leaves. Take these with you. You get a little pouch. It almost looked like at the grocery store you get those little tubes of popcorn.
Okay.
It looked like that, but just like stuffed with leaves, like long leaves. And Sorry. And yeah, they were like, you just every once in a while take a little clump of this stuff, put it in your mouth, and just chew it, kind of like chewing tobacco. And it'll help with the elevation, and it'll also kind of
Opens
get
up
rid of
your
some hunger
respiratory
pains.
system.
Yeah,
You're
it'll
not
give you
hungry
energy,
anymore.
and it worked great.
Well, that's even the refined stuff like cocaine was called Bolivian marching powder.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Because here you go, soldiers, march, 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 march. Yeah. That's really that's interesting. So I was in Peru.
Yeah.
You've been to Brazil?
Yep. Yeah, kind of all of Peru, Brazil, Chile, Argentina. I lived in Mexico for about half a year once, and then kind of all over North America too.
So in Brazil they speak Portuguese and not.
Yeah.
How was that for language?
Not bad at all, actually. I found it pretty easy. It's close enough to Spanish that I was able to pick it up pretty easily, and then within like 2 weeks, I was able to communicate at a decent level, like a grade 2 level.
Kind of like
thing,
broken
but-
English.
Yeah, definitely enough to get by. Found it a lot. French was easy for me to pick up too. Grammatically, it's almost identical to Spanish, but then apparently my teachers always complained that I spoke French with a Spanish accent,
Oh, shitty.
which I was like, I'm trying. I'm sorry,
But can you understand me?
but yeah.
Yeah, that accent just ruins it.
But then the tests I would do great in.
So, being from Chile, we've discussed this before, but I know nobody, or Dusty doesn't know, and nobody who's going to be watching this doesn't know. Can you describe kind of like, for the layman, the Cliff Notes version, what happened when Pinochet took
Like the
over
whole
Chile?
trajectory of why we came here,
And who
all that
Pinochet is. A
stuff.
lot of people don't even know what happened in Chile, and I think it's very, very important. Because we discuss U.S. foreign policy a lot,
Yeah.
and this is very right in there.
Ties in very, very directly. Yeah. So in the late 60s, early 70s, Chile was kind of starting to go away from like more of a right-wing capitalist society to more of a socialized one. And the president at that time that got elected, Allende, he was kind of seen by a lot of people as like, he wasn't a radical socialist, right? But he was implementing a lot of social programs that were going to help a lot of people.
Wasn't he like taking farmland back from private corporations and giving it to the indigenous farmers or
Yeah.
like the local people?
Yeah, which
Yeah.
obviously pissed off a lot of industries and a lot of people with a lot of money.
Corporations.
Yeah, and it made a lot of enemies with the U.S. because they had a lot of interest down there. So late 60s, early 70s, the CIA like directly started trying to form a coup and get him ousted. And it actually ended up in the 90s. There was a huge investigation that the UN was kind of trying to get going. And so at that time, Bill Clinton would have been the president. And he was like, okay, we're going to have to like hand over some documents. And in those documents, they found all kinds of evidence that all of this stuff like legitimately happened.
So they were giving like the rebels weapons and training and like
Yeah, so in the early 70s, they were attempting to directly influence a coup. And then in 73 was when there was a successful coup, but they didn't successfully influence that one. So technically the US can't be held accountable for it because they said, okay, we will support you with intelligence, acquiring things for the coup. We won't give you the things for the coup,
But we'll show
help-
you where we found them.
exactly. Training, funding, things like that. But what you guys do with that is up to you. And if you happen to have a coup, we also won't,
I'm
get
gonna
involved.
leave this sword
and,
here and point at that guy.
right? But you
What
do
you
with
do.
the sword.
And we got sword lessons at 10 and 12 today.
And whatever happens, we also won't call the cops on you, and I won't be a witness. So whatever you do, you do.
Yeah.
And so they had a coup, and so at that time there was the leader of the opposition party who wanted to become the president, but they couldn't just he couldn't just march on Capitol Hill and be like, okay, I'm taking over. So they got the general of the army to do it. So then he goes and he gets the army to literally do a military coup. They took over, basically like if they bombed the White House, that kind of thing. So the army literally marches tanks into the White House grounds, bombs the White House, and says you have a few hours to pack up your family, and you can we'll drive you to the airport, put you guys on a plane, fly you out of here, and you're good to go. You can never come back to Chile, but you get like an
Or you were going to
extradition.
be executed, or
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 you can
prison.
stay and you're going to die, kind of thing. And so he got his family out, but he decided, like the president Allende decided to stay because he was like, okay, my wife and kids, like I want them out of here, but the people voted me in, so only the people can get me out. So he decided that he was going to stay.
Leadership.
And so they got his family out and finished bombing the shit out of the building, and then found his corpse like a few hours later and dragged him out. And we actually went back to Chile a couple of years ago and got to go and walk like through, they call it the moneda, or the coin, which is like their Capitol building with like their version of the White House. And you can see the door. It's obviously all rebuilt now and stuff, but like it's I guess like a monument or whatever, because now they celebrate his
life or his death, yeah.
And but yeah, at the time, so they literally dragged his corpse out as like a sign of a victory that they had done this. And then the general decided, you know what, I'm not going to give up the power. So
Wait, what?
yeah. So the president the guy who was supposed to take over, who the CIA was like invested in having him take over, is now not going to be taken over. And the general was like, yeah, things are too unstable right now. Give me a couple years. I'll run the country until things settle down, and then you can have power. And 20 some years later, that never happened.
And that was Pinochet.
That was Pinochet, yeah. So he was the general of the army who decided that, you know what, I like this power thing.
He was a totalitarian.
Yeah, complete like violent fascist dictatorship. And so that would have been, well, basically from 74 is when he officially took power to, I think it was just over 20 years. Like early 90s, mid 90s is when he finally got ousted.
See, there's a lot of dialogue right now about fascism and all this like stuff going on, and I don't think people in North America know what fascism really is, or what will happen if a military kind of like
I don't think they realize how quick it can happen, and that once it happens, nobody else gets to intervene.
Well, like, 26 years with one military dictator?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And how long did it take for all that to go down? I mean, like the actual act of it, was it weeks, or months?
Oh, not even.
There you
it
go.
was overnight.
There you go. So days, and all of a sudden it's a quarter of a century later, and you're still living with the repercussions of that.
I want to say like 14 hours or something. They started at like 6 in the morning, and rolled it so however long it takes to roll tanks into downtown, a few hours, and then bombing started.
One day.
Yeah, just one day, and that was it.
Yeah, there's certain politicians down south that are all gung-ho on never getting out of power and, recruiting their own personal army of boots on the ground for the president. So...
And that's all shit that happens in those situations.
Yeah, that's all it really takes.
It's a lot of, it can't happen to me. And it's like, well, why not?
It just did.
Who's going to step in if it does?
Yeah, exactly.
If it does happen down there, who's going to do anything?
So
that'll be how it is until they decide to fix it themselves through revolution or evolution.
Well, I think that we're right on the cusp of something like that with all these people in the streets trying to establish like a revision of the police. Well, there's two ways it can go. Either society's going to demand a revision and accountability for the police, or the police are going to roll in with like an iron fist, and then the police are just going to say, look, we need law and order.
Yep.
And that law and order vote is the one that puts people like this in power. So there was dissidents against Pinochet that believed in social justice and believed in like people not being disappeared at night. Do you want to talk about any of that?
Yeah, so basically my mom at that time would have been about 14, 15 years old, and her family were, huge supporters of Allende. They thought that this was going to be like, the new sort of shining hope that they could have for their country to go in a right direction. So then when he gets ousted, not by getting voted out, but by literally getting murdered and having the country taken over, this was like a huge, sort of not even more than a wake-up call, sort of a call to action. And so they decided to start campaigning and organizing other students and people like that to go to marches and try and protest against this government, and try and stir up enough noise that people in other countries would hear about it and see the demonstrations and be like, oh shit, what's going on there? Maybe this isn't right. Maybe we should help.
And that is the one way that outside countries can have influence on that kind of shit is they start to sanction them.
Exactly,
they start to say you don't get to be part of the fucking G8 anymore, or the G20 or whatever, right? Like when you do shit like that.
Cuba right now, all they have is their tourist industry because nobody will send them anything, except I think they get some stuff from China and some stuff from Mexico. But.
Yeah, I think like Ecuador was trading with them too until the U.S. started putting sanctions on them for trading with Cuba.
So your mom was involved with like some political actions or
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, there was a group there that was kind of like the main group or whatever that was trying to get that president ousted.
it was like a
And,
resistance movement.
Yeah, and so she was a part of that. My whole family was actually, and so then their dad was like a labor, like a union leader, and one day he just showed up dead.
They got hoffed.
Yeah.
Disappeared or no?
Jesus
They
fucking
killed
No,
him.
well, he had an accident. He worked on the railroad his whole life, but then one morning he had an accident. Accidentally slipped under one of the cars, and the car rolled over him. And
Strange
so
accident.
yeah, weird how that happens. And then my two oldest uncles got arrested, and they basically told them, "Listen, we know that you guys are taking parts in these protests and stuff. Cut it out, or you're gonna disappear." And that was a big thing that they would do down there is no trial, no anything like that. You just don't come home one day. You would get picked up by the police, taken down to the station, and then the next morning you wouldn't come home, and your family would be like, "Hey, what happened? Like, my dad got arrested." And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we brought him in, asked him some questions, and then, oh, it says right here, we released him at like 2 a.m. Did you not come home? Oh, that's weird. We don't know what happened."
Yeah, we'll look into it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. There was so many people.
There was just a lot of really bad serial killers at the time.
Right,
Catching
something.
people
It's-
at 2
It's just
a.m.
weird. They're going missing. We don't know what's happening.
Well, there was a bunch of serial killers down there, but they were wearing badges and shit.
And yeah, they all had uniforms, right?
So
When you have no accountability.
Yeah.
Right.
Who do you
Exactly.
call?
Who-
Yeah.
yeah.
When, who polices the police?
Who are they accountable for, too,
Yeah.
right? And that's a place where it's not rubber bullets. Right? They're going to fucking use real bullets if they feel like it.
it kind of got to the point where they were just like, okay, this is getting way too crazy. We need to leave the country. And so they fled to Argentina, and basically just like middle of the night, don't tell anybody because you don't know who to trust. Neighbors are turning in neighbors. It's just like this wild.
And this is your
anarchism
like
kind
your
of
mom
thing.
and uncles.
Yeah, and so yeah, they fled to Argentina and hid out there in like halfway houses for a little over a year, while petitioning to the UN for like to get political asylum somewhere. They didn't care where; they just needed a safe place.
Some place that wasn't walking distance from where they just were.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to be
Yeah.
flying distance or like a boat's length.
Oh yeah,
Well,
because at
and
that
if,
time
if the
too.
government found them, they'd kill them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
at
you're
that
sending them
time
back,
too.
right?
Like they were.
Because you're escaping because you're a dissident. They're not
Totally.
going to be like, sweet, come on back and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and so they started petitioning, and Canada was the first place that answered, and they were like, okay, we can bring over one of you, and this person, whoever it is, needs to basically show that they can find a job, that then they can sponsor one of your other family members who can come over and get a job and sponsor the next family member kind of thing. And so my oldest uncle ended up coming first, and then I think it only took like a year or two before they were kind of able to all come over. Not to the same province though, because you only get like each province is allowed like a cap on how many refugees or immigrants they can accept.
So you guys were
So-
straight up refugees, political refugees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they were. And then, so yeah, that would have been when my mom was about 17 to 19. And then around the 20-year mark, I was born, like her 20-year
Oh yeah,
mark
yeah, yeah.
would have been when I was born. And then like a year or two later, so now she's 21, 22, she figures that, you know what, things haven't gotten better down there. I can't help as much as I want to from up here. I want to go back. So
I want to meet your mom
Fuck
someday.
around.
Really?
Fuck, I feel like I've been holding my breath for most of this fucking story, honestly. And now you're like, she's gonna go back. I'm like, nope, she's not. You're gonna stay here. And like, I'm even outraged at the fact that you guys, or not, sorry, you guys, but your family members were all fucking split up and gradually brought over. And it's like, I get that there's some thinking to try and protect the system so it's not overwhelmed, but like, these are family members, these are brothers and sisters that like,
Yeah.
no, you can't even live in the same fucking province, let alone city, if you're gonna come. We're doing you the service of getting you here and away from the situation, but no, you're still not gonna be allowed to live together.
right.
Like, what the fuck? What the fuck?
Well, there's a system to it.
I guess. Yeah, right. Well, I guess I'm sure
It's a
there's some
very
argument to be
efficient
made,
and
but
well
you gotta-
thought out
yeah,
and
you gotta-
compassionate
gotta be a
system.
better. Yeah, that's the thing. The lack of compassion with that. I get that there's probably some technical reason why that's the way to do it to protect some sort of something, But fuck me. I can't imagine. I got 2 brothers. I can't imagine us going through this shit and then getting someplace and then being like, cool, okay, well, you're going to be about 800 miles this way. You're going to be about 12,000 miles that way. You know what I mean? And you're going to get to stay here. Like, and just be like so fucking grateful because you're not worried about being murdered because of your opinions.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was
Fuck
literally it.
around.
So yeah, then,
Continue.
so then at that point she decides that she's gonna go back. So my dad, her, and myself packed up our bags and started making our way down. They couldn't fly directly back down because then like they were on a list, obviously.
So the government would be monitoring who flew into the.
Yeah.
And this is how many years since they'd been down there?
So that would have been they fled when my mom was about 16. So then about 6 years, I guess. So about 20. So when she was like 22,
within
23.
10 years for sure.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh,
for
okay.
Sure,
Yeah. Fuck yeah. They probably still got that paperwork there.
Oh yeah.
They got them lists kicking around the office.
And so then we kind of started bouncing away down, went to Mexico, lived there for a little while they were kind of setting up some, backroom communication with Chile to like get smuggled back into the country.
Sorry, I gotta pause this one more time. I feel like near the beginning of this, when you were talking about like, I've lived in this part of South America and Central America and Mexico. In my head, even I'm like, fuck, that's a lucky dude. Oh man, he's getting to go and live in all these sweet places. What a fun time, hey. It's like, so I lived in Mexico for a bit while we were trying to make contact with the resistance.
Covert operations.
Spend much time on the beach. Did you learn how to surf? You know, like that's what I'm picturing. I'm like, fucking what a sweet something. Yeah, fuck.
Yeah, it was an interesting childhood for sure.
Fuck, it's
And we eventually, about a year of traveling, made it back into the country and got set up on a little acreage in Chile, and it ended up kind of being the storage place for a lot of the weapons and other things that the resistance was stockpiling there.
They needed to operate.
Yeah, they needed, to have a safe place for this kind of stuff, to be far enough away from, the main city centers and stuff like that, and be able to see who's coming and know all that kind of stuff. I actually remember one year when I was like, I would have been like maybe 5 or 6 or something. And so at that time in Chile, Christmas wasn't really a big thing, but Easter is like the main celebration where you would do like the gift exchanges and all that stuff. So it would have been close to Easter, and I'm playing, running around the house and stuff, and I don't even remember how exactly, but I found this toy gun, and I'm like, oh, fucking sweet, it's got to be for me, right? And I come running out into the living room, and I'm like pointing it at both my parents, and bang, 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 right? And I'm like, this is so cool. And I remember, like, I still vividly remember the kind of panicked expression on their faces. And my dad's like, oh, let me just take that from you. And I'm like, I knew I was in trouble, but I didn't know why. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. Yeah, I was playing, like I wasn't digging for toys, but I found it. And
I found my toys. Don't get mad at me.
Don't get mad at me. And he's like, no, it's actually for another little boy, like one of my buddy's kids. I was like, God damn it, like this guy never gives me anything, And I was just like really bummed about it because it was such a cool gun. And then probably, years later, I'm like 13, 14 or something. And I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh, Mom, was that a real fucking gun? And she's like, oh, yeah.
Oh, shit.
I'm like,
Yeah,
God
bang, bang, yeah.
I could have
Chicken
killed
makes all the
both
right
my
noises.
parents.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Well,
Yep.
Such is the way in a revolution, right?
Yeah. Another time I was playing around again, and I knew that they had gone, I think I saw somebody like bring in a toy truck. So I knew it was in the house somewhere. And I was like, where would they hide it? Probably under the bed. That's a good hiding spot. But I dig under the bed and pull out a fucking AK-47, like a real one. I was like, but I didn't know that. I was 6 years old. I was like, fuck, this thing is so heavy and metallic and smells weird. And there's so many other rifles in it. What's going on?
This isn't a good toy
no,
for
this
me.
isn't a good toy. I can't even lift this thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of the situation there. It was like my mom was trying to be more of like a political activist, while my dad was complete full-on militant. He was like, no, this is a militant occupation. It has to be overthrown militarily.
So by political activists, you mean like education and literature and stuff like that?
Trying to, exactly. Like
versus
going to
direct
rallies,
action.
handing out pamphlets, talking to people, trying to recruit people.
In the meantime, your old man's in the background, like, putting on war paint and, like, fucking get
Literally.
ready. Like, I want to fucking do this.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you need both. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to be ready.
So
Hopefully you
then-
don't have to use that one because the education and shit works, right? And then if not, I mean,
Well,
that's
she's
how you
still
got there in the
very
first
much
place was get guns, take over.
Yeah. So that
when did you come back?
well, we stayed there for I think like 3-4 years, and then by the time just after my 6th birthday, we moved back here. Kind of the same thing again. It wasn't really going, the way that they were hoping for. My mom was like, you know what, it's starting to get way too dangerous. At that time, there were a lot of incidences, I guess, like the political movement was doing things like bombing police stations and things like that, and like just outright, like if they attempted to assassinate the president at that time, like actually did an ambush on his motorcade and stuff, and the heat was just getting way too much. So my mom was like, you know what, I wanted to do this the right way through political activism. I wasn't down with like all of this kind of shit, and this is literally endangering her life and my kid's life. So we're going back to Canada. And so we pieced out, and my dad decided he was going to stay down there, and that's what he did. And
Where's your pop now? Did he live?
So that would have been so I said like when I was about 6 or 7. For about 6 or 7 years, he basically just kind of bounced around all over Latin America, going to Cuba for training and stuff like that. Did some training with some guys from Afghanistan, who later ended up doing their own thing. And
but they weren't American. No.
And and
Rhymes with
basically
Schmalaban.
And basically just like literally being a part of a mercenary unit while they were trying to do all kinds of different jobs to collect money so they could send back to Chile for the resistance. And it kind of culminated in would have been probably about 12. So what is that? 92, early 90s sometime, where him and a little group of people decided that it would be a good idea to kidnap a millionaire in Brazil, a guy who had a sugar empire down there. And they were like, oh, if we kidnap this guy and hold him for ransom, we'll get a lot of money, and then we can send back a lot of money to Chile for the resistance. And it didn't go their way, so they got arrested, and he ended up spending I think about 15 years in jail for that, and then got released because there was enough kind of people campaigning for people that had gotten in trouble for being Chilean activists.
Was he considered a political prisoner, or was it? Did they consider it a political act, or
no?
Okay.
But there was enough kind of pressure on the Chilean government to sort of step in for people that had done crimes based on that kind of stuff.
Because Pinochet was out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So once he got out, then they started kind of, getting things rolling to help people that had kind of gotten in trouble for that. So then he served his sentence, and they decided to let him come back to Chile, but he was kind of, because of all of his illicit activities, he had to stay there. So he's still there.
He's in Chile?
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Did you visit?
So we hadn't been back forever, and then like 2 years ago we went back for about a little over a month just to kind of visit again, so my mom could, see her homeland again, and my brother had never been there, so it was a good chance for him to go see it too.
It's interesting at work. Jose's gone for a couple months. I'm like, where's Jose? I think he went back to Chile to visit his dad. I'm like, oh, okay. I know none of the backstory. I'm like, oh, okay. Jose's on holiday. Long holiday. All right.
Yeah. I wonder if it's been a bit since he's seen his old man. Where do they go fishing? You think they go fishing?
Exactly.
Yeah, that was a really weird. I don't even know if you'd call it a vacation, really. We were back there, and the entire time was just tense, right? Even though we didn't really talk about anything, like before we went down there, as soon as we got there, I have all kinds of negative, associations with the country. My mom's got, way more than I do. There was just like little things that I didn't even really put together until afterwards. Like we're walking down the street one day, and this car just like pulls up really fast beside the sidewalk, and this guy jumps out and opens the back door, and my mom like almost jumps into my arms, like she just like and just like does this really quick jerk thing. And in my head I remember thinking they weren't even that close to us, like they were, like there was no way they were going to hit us. Like I don't know why she panicked that much.
Yeah, she's thinking she might get taken.
And that's literally what she was thinking. And it was just a guy like, trying to let his buddy out real quick, on the side of the sidewalk so he could take off again before traffic kind of comes or whatever. Like complete innocent
But in her
action.
head, it's like
But
it's
in
the
her
fucking
head-
G-men coming together
Exactly,
to
yeah,
torture her
she's
to
like-
find out where the fucking headquarters are.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Jesus
people who grew up in
Christ.
North America without that kind of stuff don't really know what that's like. I guess maybe the people avoiding ICE might
Yeah,
have some
yeah.
sort of idea what that's like if you're an undocumented immigrant in the States or something like that.
Oh,
but yeah, I don't know, man. That's crazy. And in Pinochet's, I watched this movie. It was on Netflix. It was called Colonia. Have you heard this? And it was about this place. It was a camp that was established, a religious camp by post-World War II Germans.
Oh, yeah.
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 It was called Colonia Dignidad, and this place was funded, I think, by some degree by Pinochet because they had torture chambers and they disappeared people for the movement, and it was run by Nazis. It was a religious camp where the guy was like a pedophile. He was like all kinds of crazy stuff happened there. If you look it up, the show's called Colonia, and it's nuts. That there was like
Yeah,
underground.
it's straight south of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
go far enough south.
It's
and then
one
shit's on
landmass,
the
right? You
line.
go south of far enough.
Yeah, that colony still exists. Yeah, they had a deal set up with the government that because it was kind of seen like it's a little colony, so it's almost like a little sovereign, chunk of land, and they would just rent out a house on it, and the government was able to take people in there and question them without any kind of
They had a whole underground network of like rooms and hallways and chambers where they would do all kinds of horrible shit to people.
Yeah, and kind of and it was really weird because like you know how there are things that you learn when you're growing up, but then there are things that you just know. You know what I mean? Like you've heard your parents talk about them enough that you just know these things, right? You don't know how you know them, but it's just like common knowledge. So you assume that everybody knows this because it's just common knowledge. So I grew up hearing about how the CIA had camps all over South America. It was called the School of the Americas. That was literally the name of it. And it was a CIA camp where they would teach people from all different governments in South America would send troops there to learn advanced interrogation tactics taught by the CIA. So they could go back to Chile, Nicaragua, and
So they're legitimately teaching the foot soldiers of these despots how to be better torturers.
Yep.
interrogators.
Enhanced.
Tomato to torture murderer.
Yeah.
Tomato
And so these kind of things, I just grew up thinking everybody knows this because, I know this, my cousins know, everybody knows this, right? And so then, fast forward here when I'm in school and we're taking, history class and social studies and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, the U.S., they're the bad guys. Wait, they're not?
They're
You
not
guys,
here?
Wait, you guys don't know about this stuff? Oh, should I not be talking about this stuff?
We got an
It's
entirely bizarro world version of the propaganda. Like these are our, happy, this is our happy world. We prosper from that expansion.
Yeah.
What is it? The Guatemalan with United Fruit Company,
Oh,
the
yeah,
Banana
yeah.
Republic. That I think it was the same sort of deal where the leader of Guatemala was saying, guess what? We're going to give a lot of the farms back to our own farmers here, and the United Fruit Company has to give back the land. And they went back, and the CIA with a propaganda or a public relations firm put out, this is a communist takeover, they're ousting American interests, we're not going to be able to get our bananas anymore, and they funded an underground it's a coup, a straight up coup.
Yeah.
And you told me, I guess,
Over
when
bananas.
over bananas, and people were dying.
That is
and
bananas.
yeah, right, it's a banana republic. And yeah, you mentioned that right off the bat, that when you came to Canada, that you don't know that America does this everywhere else in the world. No,
There
we're
were
part
a
of
lot
that.
of things.
You're in the fences
Right?
here.
Yeah, exactly.
You are inside the fences.
Yeah, we're within the fucking dome.
Well, even certain things that are just part of pop culture, like Star Wars. Star Wars was huge in Latin America, and
Probably for different reasons.
for different reasons. Because down there, they were like, "Oh, a group of rebels fighting against the Empire."
Yeah.
This was clearly a movie about people like us fighting against the U.S. And
Stormtroopers
other
and-
people had different ideas about those movies.
No, they're the scrappy upstarts.
So it's very interesting when I see people that may be anti-refugee or anti-immigrant in Canada that don't have that understanding how this can happen to other people and the
It's
situations.
just for trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Hey, and starting out not trying to be violent at all. That's what people always think. It's like, oh well, if there's violence going on, there's two sides and somebody's involved, and then they're escaping here, and it's like, nope. You know what I mean? No, that is not the case. If that was the case, he'd stick around like your old man did. That's if you wanted to be part of that, you'd stay and be part of that, right? Well, and that's I was kind of wondering, like, was he ever like, hey, why don't you come down here and help out?
No, well, I mean, by the time that when I was young, that was kind of like what was going to happen, right? So he was very much like
he was convinced you were going to be part of the resistance.
Yeah,
and shit.
yeah, I was going to.
Well, I think your entire ethics are given to you by your family one way or another.
Right.
Whether or not you're going to be an activist or not, but like your morality and your value system is built by that structure, right?
But yeah, he was. I mean, basically from when I was 7 or 8 would have been the last time that I really had much contact with him.
Sure.
But before that, it was you're a soldier. That was always his thing.
Shit.
You're a soldier. You know, when you grow up, like this is the way things are going.
Mm-hmm.
And
so if you just stayed down there, that's what would happen.
I would assume, yeah. That's one of the reasons why it's kind of funny. Like Pat and I talk a lot about things like patriotism, and I always say like I refuse to let that be owned by right-wing people.
You are the most patriotic motherfucker I know. I've known like skinheads are like pro Canada. Jose is the most patriotic motherfucker.
He has a very excellent comparison to compare it to directly.
You like freedom? I mean? He really likes freedom.
I've seen both sides of it intimately, and I know which one is significantly better.
Well, and I can directly draw like my life to the fact that Canada took us in. You know what I mean? Because my family's life was going in one direction down there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they had already decided that they were going to stand up to the government, and the government had already decided that they were going to kill people who stood up to them. So like that was only headed in one direction.
Yeah.
So had they not gotten the asylum, I wouldn't be here. Like literally.
I think of this as an aside, and I don't want to hijack this, but when I see a lot of people talking shit about Muslim people in Canada, especially like women in hijabs and stuff like that, and they're like, they're bringing their sexism and they're bringing their Sharia law to Canada. I'm like, have you considered the fact that maybe these people want to move to a more liberal society and escape fundamentalism?
Yeah,
and that's why they're here? Sure, they're wearing a hijab. That doesn't mean that they want to live somewhere where they're going to get stoned for showing like a few hairs. Like, maybe they're escaping a life that you say that they are trying to bring here, and I don't even understand that. That would be like you're trying to bring Chilean fascism to Canada.
Yeah, right. Like, well, if that's what we wanted, we'd stay in the country that was letting you do that.
That's what I'm saying, right? Yeah. Like that's if you want to be part of a violent uprising, you stay where the violent uprising is. You don't escape to a different country, try to infiltrate it from the ground up by working your way up through every job you can to maybe get into the politics to maybe then have some sort of No, you stay there with the AK-47s and shit.
So to be a functional citizen in Pinochet's fascist country, what kind of stuff was there? Like curfews or like restrictions on mobility? Or
at first there was, and then it started getting eased like pretty quickly, as he did a lot of, I guess, the right things, like giving the power back to the right people, giving money back to the right people, and but they really split up the country. What was that? Those series of books, with the Mockingbird and the
the Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games. Yeah. It's very much like that, like a split
District
country.
1, District
it's split
12.
and it's literally called like District 1, District, and it's so people know like, oh, District whatever 6 is like the good district to be in. District 13 is like all the blue collar workers, like you don't want to end up there, like there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
It's interesting. I think we have that in North America, but it isn't so regimented.
Right.
And I think in a lot of ways it's done on a color basis. There's a working class, there's the upper or middle class, there's the upper class, then there's the lower middle class, then there's poverty, like blue collar. One of the things, I don't know, there's a lot of confusion about the word skinhead. And skinhead came in England. No, we talked about this earlier.
It's got such a negative... just got me off guard. I was like, so you're talking about this, listen, so there's a lot of confusion about the word skinhead. Okay, I guess so.
Well, we talked about that too. When I was in high school, I started looking, I think it was for a school project, and you were supposed to do something on, I think maybe like extremism or something like that. And I was like, I don't understand racism. It just doesn't make sense to me. So that's what I'm kind of interested in. So I'm going to do a paper on that. And I started reading up some stuff about the skinhead movement in the UK. And I'm reading up on this stuff, and I was like, I identify with so much of this.
These are just working class guys that
Yeah.
had no future, that were like a more like pissed off counterculture to the hippies.
Like, that's all my friends.
You're all growing your hair and wearing sandals. We're shaving our heads and we're wearing boots.
Yeah.
And
I did.
I did.
I mean, for a lot of things in high school, like probably grade 10 and 11, like I would have fit very well in with other skinheads.
But the thing is, what ended up happening in the UK is there was the BNP, the British National Party, and then the National Front that came along, and they found a whole bunch of like fist fighting, working class, kind of like work boot and like work clothes kind of kids, and they said, well, don't you realize why you have no future, boy? All of these guys are coming to our country and they're taking your jobs. That's why you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And you should come to a meeting. And next thing you know, things just escalated. So the separation between the reggae listening working class, like shaved head skinheads, like working class skinheads, shifted, and all of a sudden there was ultra nationalist skinheads.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that were violent, and they would actually fight with each other, and they were the ones out there like, get out of our country, get out of our country. And then when that exported to the USA, that's what they all of a sudden started
That's
wearing
what it
like
kept.
military gear as opposed to the
just
working
kept
class.
the shitty side of it.
Yeah, exactly. But there's
Well,
a
that was
big
that was the louder one too, right? Like that was the one that everybody saw.
Media loves a villain.
Immediately, that's what everybody's attached to. Right?
Media loves a villain. They don't want to tell just about a bunch of working class kids that are saying, "Why can't I get a job?" You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they'll get the loudest one in the back who's got some crazy racist rhetoric that he wants to spout too.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
It's
that's
for
gonna
the
get
group.
people
That speaks
upset.
for the group, and you're like, well, okay.
See, and
And
that's
that soundbite, yeah.
there's a confusion in North America too when it comes to we were talking about the districts, like blue collar. What? You fucker.
Trying to do this discreetly.
Do it as quietly as possible.
Yeah. Do it sounding well.
What blue collar is, right? Here we think if you're a tradesperson, you're blue collar, and that's working class. But like in the UK and old school like class divisions, work or blue collar is the laborers. You go on the job site. I can't do anything. I don't know how to cut. I don't know how to measure. You pick this up and carry it there. And I come from a blue collar
Not a
background.
shovel.
Yeah, exactly. I could work in a porn store. I could like load. I remember I had a midnight till 8 a.m. job where I just took bundles of newspapers off of a conveyor belt and put them on a truck.
Oh.
That was my job. And the moving furniture, like that's blue collar.
I had a job for quite a while actually, working in a wood shavings bagging plant. Just remind me of fucking doing that, where you put this plastic bag in this machine, fill it with wood shavings, and they'd weigh like anywhere from 70 to 90 pounds, and then stack these bags on pallets as far as I could reach on my tippy toes,
Yeah.
and then repeat.
Yeah.
And then repeat.
So
and then
that's your
repeat.
job, and so you're like, fuck, I got no future here,
Nope.
right? And so I
Sore
think
bad.
that's where I think where the skinhead culture originated in, and it's
They
gotta
took
be
the
the same thing.
conversation only so far, right? Because it's like, why is this, where you're stuck in life? Well, let's look at that.
Yeah.
Whose fault is it really?
And the wrong people were giving them answers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The people invested in where they wanted the answer to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, an agenda. Now, can you imagine if like labor organizers got a hold of them and said, well, shit, it's because these guys that run the factories aren't hiring guys like you, or they're not willing to train guys like you. But then, who's willing to take the jobs that the average person doesn't want to take? The people that need to do those jobs.
Well, that's the whole giving the laborers the means of production.
I don't know if I even understand that principle, giving them the means of production so that the laborers own everything. Like,
Yeah, basically. So
I totally fucking agree with that.
whatever.
Because that actually, sorry, I don't want to jump in too
Yeah.
hard here, but that just kind of reminds me of something that I've thought frequently. That like, how is like a Jeff Bezos? How is his year worth that much more in imaginary numbers than my year is? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, does he do that much himself personally, physically in the world that is worth that disproportionate amount? Like, I understand that he's made investments and he has companies that do this, that, and the other thing. But
Yeah.
he personally, how is that one person worth all of that for their time? And then all of our other time is so disproportionately fucking less.
the guys with calluses on their hands.
Yeah.
That's way,
They're
it's way
getting
more
paid.
fucking work. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows the lower you are on the totem pole, the more fucking work you have to do, right? Like actual physical, in the real world, making shit actually happen work. And not to say that management isn't important and somebody overseeing it, but it is a huge. It's too disproportionate. It's ridiculous. And I mean, you can fix that too by taxing them fucking.
Tax those
appropriately.
motherfuckers.
Because them going, my 30% is so much bigger than yours. You go, cool. You should lose 90% of that shit.
Well,
Because you're not doing the fucking work anyways, and you wouldn't have any of it if we all quit.
you see, giving the means of production back to all the workers and the owners of those corporations, just like, we're confiscating your shit. That's straight communism, right?
Yeah.
And I tend to believe you can be rich, but we're going to tax you fairly. we're going to tax you as much as the guy on the ground who has to spend 30% of his income to, you know, the income tax. Why do you guys get like offshore tax havens and shell companies and trusts to hide your money under, while I have to pay a reasonable amount of taxes? You know, I'm still working to pay last year's taxes. Like, so Jeff Bezos, I did a philanthropic enterprise over here. I gave some money to learn to read, just enough that I don't have to pay those taxes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which, that starts to get down into like the capitalist system of the U.S., which is a different type of capitalist system than we have in Canada.
Yeah, I think that's super valid. Like theirs is, wow, I forget the specific word. It's either oligarchy or plutocracy. Either way, it's those with money and elite power are the ones that decree what laws are made. There's a group called APEC. Actually, I just watched another documentary this last week with Black Lives Matter.
What you watching?
Yeah, what you watching? It's the 13th or 13th.
Yeah.
And they talk about the evolution of slave owners. When you think about it, it was a capitalist system. I want to have a business. I want free labor. Or it's not even free. They bought what they thought was labor. That is now my property, and they're going to make me an empire. But then that became outdated. So what they did is they said, well, shit. And now what are we going to do? The Klan kept people in line. You know what I mean? Here you go. You guys stay here, and this is our country over here. But then that evolved where the prison system rolled in, and they said, well, shit, we could start making money off of these guys in prison. Well, we need more people in prison. How do we get there? By making laws specifically to put certain people that were once brought here as laborers, free labor, in jail where they can do free labor for these corporations. They can no longer vote when they get out. They can't get out. And the people that are making the laws that put these fucking dudes in jail are privatized corporations in conjunction with legislative bodies. So a group called APEC, APEC, get together and they pre-write laws that they hand out to lawmakers and say, put your name here, put your state here. And these laws are sort of like the 3 strike and you're out rule, harsher sentences on crack cocaine, stuff that specifically affects certain people. You get in jail
There's no social outcry from anybody for anybody. We got to crack down more on crack cocaine, but somebody somewhere finds financial value in it, so a bill gets passed.
So yeah, this APEC group are sort of like there will be the privatized prison corporation, but then also the food company that makes the food for the prison. Also the clothing company that's going to benefit from the prison labor. All these different companies, they put in votes on which legislation they want. They're all anonymous votes. And when they check those votes, they're like, oh, yeah, this is the legislation we're coming up with. And next thing you know, you've got harsher crimes specifically for stuff happening in marginalized communities. Powdered cocaine is one sentence. Crack cocaine is a different sentence. Because one is considered the white drug and the other is like a hood drug. And like you can have less crack cocaine than powder cocaine and you get a stiffer sentence because that's a marginalized crime, right? Or it's a crime largely affecting marginalized communities. So that's why I think Canada versus
and they
US,
make that argument. It kind of comes back to what we talked about plants. It's like, no, well, they refine this more. So when you do that, then that makes it something else. So now we punish you differently. And it's like, well, no, it's still the same fucking thing. You just, if anything, it's making it shittier. You know, it should be less punishment. You know, like,
well, right? Yeah. Well, who taught them how to refine it? Where does that
the
take
goddamn CIA, wasn't it? Jose?
It's a possibility. I'm not necessarily. Well, you know, I'm sure if we did that. Like, there's a ton of information that's out there, the declassified information that we can get a hold of, and they talk about a lot of the hip hop artists that we listen to. They talk about this. That like CIA gave the hood crack.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, crack sentences went skyrocketing, and now you have slavery. It's literally slavery. It's the documentary I think is called The 13th because it has to do with the 13th Amendment or something like that. And, it's on Netflix. Suggest watch it.
Abolish slavery.
Oh man, you'd think that they were abolishing slavery.
Just changing the name.
Yeah, changing the name.
And that kind of rolls into the whole, there's a lot of talk right now about the defund the police or abolish the police.
Oh, God.
And in the US, it used to be split up into states, right? So they would have like sheriffs and like all of that kind of stuff. When they started the actual police system to have like, cops that would patrol like an entire area, they were essentially slave catchers.
The overseers.
Like the original police department.
Whoop, whoop.
And so like that is the origins of their policing was slave catchers. And so you have to, you have to go back and kind of change the entire structure of the system if you want to change how it behaves now.
See, I guess that for the people by the people model would be. I would suggest. I don't support abolishing police. I support reformulating the idea of policing.
Yeah, yeah.
Who's the one podcast guy that you talk about a lot? That he's got the new ideas on policing and drugs and.
Michael Wood Jr. I believe is his name. Yeah, he's great because he used to be a cop. He was part of the Baltimore. Well, he was a Marine, like a career Marine, who then became a career cop, and ended up just being so like disillusioned by all of the different rules and stuff like that they had to follow. He would legit be like, okay, we have a quota of this many people that I have to like have tickets for by the end of the month or whatever. And he knows that if he goes to the black neighborhood, he's going to be able to give people tickets for, these petty crimes.
Your car isn't up to snuff.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, so that goes into the books. And he's like, okay, I'm meeting my quotas and whatnot. And so he flat out admits that he would legit do this kind of stuff. And he was in Baltimore. And they had something there. I think it was called something like the butterfly map or something like that. It was just like the map of the city where the bus wouldn't go because it was kind of like the more dangerous area of town. And so he's like, if people live in that area, they have to get a job. If it's going to be a good paying job, it has to be outside of that area. But they can't get on the bus to go to this job, so they have to have a vehicle. They don't, they miss their payment for their monthly, plate on their vehicle. I can just drive down, and if I spend the day in one of these poor neighborhoods, guaranteed I'll find 3 people whose plates aren't up to snuff. Here you go, ticket.
So isn't that a ghetto and then a police line to get out of the ghetto?
Essentially.
And then we're going to put you further in debt to stay in there?
And then he started looking at this stuff and he's like, oh shit. So the only method of transportation that this person has to be able to get to a decent enough job that they're going to eventually be able to get out of the ghetto, I'm taking that away from them because I need to have my numbers match up at the end of the month.
Why are there even police quotas?
Right?
To support your revenue?
Yeah.
That's some fucked up shit.
So,
and I would think like the examples of an advanced society is you don't have police quotas. We had no incidences this month. We didn't have to go out and track down a bunch of shit.
We're doing a great job.
We looked for things that were actual problems instead of fine-tuned fucking combing looking for a way to fill my paperwork out. Like that, That's like it's like quoting like how well your educate or your healthcare system, how much money it made during the year is like a benefit to your country, when it's like, no, that's money from sick people
by inventing things to heal people for.
That. You know what I mean?
But who does that? Invents things to heal people for just to make money. Nobody does that, right?
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute.
There's no wait what?
Wait a minute.
Yeah, okay. Just to support the economy.
Right. He ended up being a whistleblower and got like ostracized by the rest of the police community and stuff.
What was his name again?
Michael Wood Jr.
Okay,
Michael
you can
A.
find him. He's
Wood
done a
Jr.
couple podcasts. Was he on Joe Rogan?
He was on Rogan a couple of times. Super smart guy. He's very confrontational. He's kind of a confrontational nerd. Like he knows so many stats. Like, you know what I mean? Like he knows.
He's a little anti-gun too, eh?
He is, yeah. He's he's had a lot of been on a lot of people's podcasts to like talk about why he's anti-gun. And basically, as far as he's concerned, they don't need the Second Amendment. There's ways around it. If somebody wants to hunt, they don't need to own their hunting rifle. They could go check it out at range or something like that.
He's got some interesting new revision kind of ways of gun ownership or gun use.
His whole thing is basically a gun doesn't make you safer, and he's got stats to back up how just the mere fact of you owning a gun already puts yourself and the people around you in danger. I got into an argument online once with a guy about that, and my whole I own guns, and my whole take is basically whatever the government will allow me to have, I'm going to. You know what I mean? So if the government says that I'm allowed to have rifles and shotguns and handguns and why not? Why not? They're fun. But there's also stats that show that as soon as you bring a gun into your home, the likelihood that you could accidentally or purposefully kill yourself go up.
Something that doesn't fire bullets will never fire a bullet.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, that's just, you can put all the moral implications.
The core of it here.
Yeah.
Some that doesn't shoot.
Nobody gets cuts if you don't have any sharp edges, right? Thanks.
No, and like, yeah, and then, I mean, and you just told us a story of being a small child accidentally wielding a pistol.
There you go,
That
yeah.
wasn't necessarily stored securely. Yeah.
But interestingly enough, because cool, I wanted to do a callback and come back to that original story. The idea of your dad needing firearms to protect his liberty or to protect other people's liberty at some point is the principle of the Second Amendment. In the U.S.
Yeah.
It's like, but unfortunately what I'm seeing is there isn't no underground freedom fighters that are fighting off fascism. The people that are saying Second Amendment are the fascists. They are pro-fascist. They're the ones that like, why aren't you on the streets saying, look, we're not going to take these like military tanks running through the streets, you know? Like, you guys are doing, you are tyrants. You are tyrants. That's what we have the Second Amendment for.
Well,
but
so
you don't see
crazy
them
that
out there.
You know,
Right?
the level of hypocrisy. Like the NRA is supposed to be, that's their thing, right? The Second Amendment, your right to own arms, like, and for that very reason, like it's your God-given right as an American to own these firearms, and if you should happen to have to, you know, fight against the tyrannical government, you have them, right? So, Philando Castile gets murdered by the cops in his car because he has a gun. He has a registered gun. He's allowed by law to have this gun. And the state murders him for having a licensed gun. That can't be a more sort of like poster boy for your cause, but he was black.
Oh, yeah.
And the NRA said nothing, nothing about
Well,
it.
to be fair to them, they've been having a lot of lawsuits, and they've got this real Russian spy problem that they've been dealing with.
Yeah, they did.
So I mean, it's tough for them to really get out there and do
They
all
do
the
have a
great
lot on their
social work they
plate.
normally do. You know, I'm
The
sure
NRA
I'm
social
sure they'd
justice.
be resisting the tyrannical regime like they said that they were designed for if they weren't so busy trying to defend their embezzling and
I didn't know anything about that. Yeah.
Maria Butina. You guys don't know about Maria Butina, the Russian spy that infiltrated the NRA?
No.
Oh, learn about Maria Butina, the Russian spy that infiltrated the NRA. It's a glorious story that's still currently unfolding, and how like everybody at the head of the NRA has either like stepped down in disgrace or is being sued by the NRA or somebody else.
So this person was like manipulating the NRA policy towards
Using Russian propaganda and
Interesting.
Russian influence specifically. She started dating a guy within the NRA and then used him and his influence to work her way up, having influence over people higher and higher up. Like just pictures of her with everybody from the NRA. Everybody knew who she was. She was Russian Maria. You know, she even asked Trump a question at one of his rallies from the NRA in front of everybody. Right about the same time, he's talking like, "Well, Russia, if you're listening." So
They are.
well, she was feeding Russian lines through the NRA for years, and I'm sure that wasn't the only one. And the Russians even having an interest in the NRA is hilarious to begin with because they don't want their own citizens to have guns.
Well,
so they
it creates
absolutely.
that creates disorder. It creates an
They're,
internal
well,
conflict.
they're trying to manipulate that because they figured out that there was a group that they could manipulate once they got into it by feeding them whatever they wanted to, as long as it said what they wanted it to, and then it was too late because a lot of them got caught for embezzling and like taking money directly from Russian oligarchs. Like, yeah,
I think, well, in reality, I think most of the people that are adhering to this "Don't Tread on Me" Second Amendment, like, I think they're dog whistles towards just keeping colored people in their place.
Yep.
Because most of them are white American folks, and they don't support the Black Panthers holding rifles on, like, you know, Capitol steps. They're like, that's not what we mean. Well,
Yeah,
that's
right.
literally what you say you mean, but that's not what we mean. So I think what they really are is just that whole deal of good old boys that want to keep their rifles to keep things the same. And as soon as things start really changing, but the reason that a Russian like spy would want to be involved in that is straight up to manifest an internal conflict.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like the divisiveness. There was another documentary I saw where white nationalist rallies were being sponsored and organized by an IP address that came out of Russia, and then also being advertised to Antifa groups that this is where the rally's going to happen, to intentionally get these people conflict in the streets.
the
right?
Russians don't have a side on this; they have Russia.
Yeah,
That's their
yeah,
side.
yeah.
They hope it like, oh, if we can both fight amongst
Destabilize
ourselves,
an economy?
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
the entire
their
world
plan
is
has
watching.
worked. Their
Well,
plan has worked.
Well, and that's just it. It's like literally riots in the street. Like people are watching what's happening in the States with fucking popcorn. Sorry, guys, we're all watching
how
you.
How else could Putin have made this happen, right? You know what I mean? Like it's
well, not just him. I'm sure
it's
there's
what he
other
wants.
people. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's begging the US to burn itself down. He's going, I wish I could. I wish we could just take over and be the dominant global force.
Or China.
Guess what's
Because
happening?
it's going to be Russia, China, two different worlds. Like, you know, the Chinese. Mark my words. I remember reading. I think it was like in '99, where this article and a congressman. They were being typical, you know, cocky dudes, and there was this a whole bunch of different like economic summit, and there was a Chinese guy there, and the congressman cocky. He's like. So when's China going to step up into the world economic market, huh? Ha 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 ha. And the guy's like, we have a plan. By 2025, we think we should be the dominant economic power in the world. And he's like,
he's joking out. This dude's like, you really want to know?
Yeah, we have a plan. By 2025, they plan to be the dominant economy in the world.
They're heading that way.
Yeah, and it doesn't
play the
surprise
long
me.
game.
Well, and that's just it. You know, just watch what's happening in a degenerate society. You know, it's funny because I do follow... what do they call it? Oppositional research. Like I've got extreme leftists in my feeds, you know, my social media feeds, but I also follow a lot of extreme right-wing people in my feeds. And extreme right-wing people, their big deal is that society is materialist and it's degenerate and it's on a downward swing because, you know, we have no values, no tradition, no spirituality left, and it's all superficial materialism, right? And then on the other side, the left say, well, the new world we're building is all about do what you will, be whoever you want. Tradition is a thing of the past, and we reject that, right? So I'm kind of in the middle. Like I see the need for tradition, and I understand the need for, you know, being a better person than I was yesterday. But I also understand that my version of what a better person is also different than what Jose's version of what a better person is, and what, you know, a trans individual, his or her better tomorrow might be his or her better tomorrow as the other gender. So who am I to really say what they're doing is wrong or what those guys are doing is wrong? So it's a tough one. It's a real tough one. You know, in Russia, they'll just hammer the shit out of you with a Cossack whip.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
They'll tell you what your opinion is.
There's a YouTube...
I was just picturing my feed, and I got lots of little dogs in wheelchairs.
Oh, yeah?
That's I don't have a lot of right-wing or super left-wing stuff.
Oh,
Lots
man.
of little dogs in wheelchairs.
Yeah, I've got that political messianic save the world thing going on, you know, and trying to figure it out.
That doesn't hurt to try.
Well, somebody asked me just
Especially
yesterday.
just talking. We're just talking here.
Yeah, shooting the shit.
God.
Somebody asked me yesterday, or they made a joke, and it made me super uncomfortable. Like, you should be prime minister. I'm like, ugh. Like, no, I shouldn't. I just made me vomit. I'm like, no, I don't want any responsibility. All I would do is put cookums in charge, like indigenous grandmothers
Just
run the
force of
shit.
grandmas,
You
yeah.
know, indigenous grandmothers can tell everybody, don't do that. Feed people. Don't be mean to each other.
Right.
Not a bad idea.
Pretty
Yeah.
straightforward, right?
You're a jerk.
Yeah.
Quit doing
What
that.
agenda you got?
And that's the world I believe in, you know.
Yeah, the bluntness of a grandmother.
Well, right, and like they're not they're strict enough in a compassionate way, you know. The grandpas usually are too strict, and like definitely the dads I don't necessarily. I think they had their chance and they ran it out. So maybe we need to
Sorry, dads.
let the grandmas make the decisions for a while. I think that would be a good one.
Let the moms take the wheel.
Yeah, well maybe grandmas because grandmas
They're a little older, a little wiser.
that's exactly
You
it.
got a
You know,
position
moms
for
can
uncles?
still be
I don't know
pretty.
what I'm doing.
Well, think about it, right?
Long
So
clip.
if you can imagine like a tribal society where like a matrilineal kind of organization where the young men are taking care of their moms and their grandmas and they're willing to stand as that guard against the people that can't protect themselves. I remember in Japan the big thing is firefighters are like the symbol of like strength and honor and like sacrifice and courage because Tokyo or Japan largely was a city built of paper and wood. And to be a fucking firefighter, you needed to have guts. You have these big jackets that you douse in water, and you run into buildings and throw buckets of water. So these guys were like the first kind of like chivalric, organizations of what manhood should be. And I remember being in Japan. Of course, it was kind of closely linked with my nervous breakdown. But thinking like in the Western culture, we think of the soldier or the cop as what a man should be. You know, like the warrior archetype. But over there, it's almost like the firefighter. the protector and the courageous protector is like what a man should be. And I really like looking at it that way. Like, think about it. A firefighter, you have to be fit, you have to be compassionate, you have to be able to heal to some degree. You're saving people from danger versus just enforcing the law or enforcing dominance over another thing. And that's the whole military deal. So I'm thinking that that's where I'm at. I really like firefighters.
Well, and like like physically in the world, like what's the difference in that fight? You know what I mean? Like militarily, you're fighting against another man using weapons or whatever, but that you're using your tools against a fucking fire. You know what I mean? Like that's
for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I gotta think it's like a similar physical experience for what you do in the world without so much destruction. You're trying to stop the destruction, right?
I think that goes into the philosophy of policing too, though. You know, the whole punishment thing. You committed a crime, so I need to stop you from committing the crime, but then I'm also going to punish you for having committed that crime, as opposed to saying, like, stop you from committing the crime, and then let's figure out why you did it, you know, and let's help you so that you don't do it again.
Well, policing, the idea would be we're saving a community from evil, right? Like, if you want to go there, what's evil? Like, it's violating consent. It's hurting people. Now, when did that change over into raising revenue because you broke the law and the technical little things, you know, and then we're taking your money, and that's no longer keeping a community
Well,
safe.
like in the example of the expired tags, like that's as simple as hey, how's it going? You should get those checked out right away. You can you take care of that this afternoon? You can't have parked on the street like that. Okay, great. Yeah. Have a good day.
If you don't do it within the next few weeks, I'm going to have to give you a ticket.
Write it up. Here you go. Thank you. I need 2 more this week. I see your neighbors are both fucked, so I'll be right over there.
Yeah, exactly.
That sucks.
In Regina,
and it's not good for either side to be in, because you get desensitized on the one side. We're like, it's just what I do, and then the other side, sometimes you're like, no, this really fucks me. Like, I'm gonna maybe even lose this house that this car's parked in
because I can't make a rent payment or a mortgage payment.
Fuck me up, and I got to go to fucking court, and then.
Yeah.
When all this stuff was going on, just down in Regina, there was a stop check, and they tried to do it as like, look how cool we are, we're cool cops, and it was a stop for a pop, and they were just randomly stopping vehicle after vehicle after vehicle, and if you weren't doing anything wrong, they gave you a Pepsi or whatever, like. And in my mind,
what if you were doing something wrong?
Then you got your ticket. If they smelled weed and you're driving, you get a ticket. If you see something illegal in the car, you're getting
no thanks on the soda.
Yeah, leave me the fuck alone. How about that? And that really kind of what bugged me. Well, like they're like, look, we're cool, and we're still using our arbitrary authority to fucking interrupt your day and to like pull you over and get you to open your window and check your papers. But we're cool, and we're telling you we're cool because we give you a Pepsi.
Hey,
and
they're just trying to do something nice.
Well, but that's just
you're probably a little parched. You've had a long day.
Okay. I'm like, is this where we're going? But that really it. That was it, because their entire thing was like, we're cool too. But all I see is just arbitrary, bullshit. And I saw this other tweet from a woman who's like, so all of this stuff's going on in the States, and she just got pulled over by a cop who said, I just pulled you over to let you know that you're really pretty and you should have a good day.
Yeah, I saw that.
And she's like, who the fuck does that guy think he is that he can stop me using his authority to basically hit on me and then send me on my way? Like, that's the most fucked up abuse of authority. What was I doing wrong? Nothing. You just decided to scare the shit out of me, threaten my fucking freedom. Because if there's a single hiccup when you deal with a cop, bye-bye. Like, for a regular person, that's the entry point to a big, scary, monstrous machine that you may never get out of. Right? The legal system, the judicial system.
Oh, I think every single fucking time I get pulled
when you
over.
see cherries, it's like, fuck, here we go. Please don't take me away.
Of my life.
Well, and that's just it. If you're different, District 1, District 2, District... Yeah. If you're further down the districts or further down the color wheel,
this could be
I may die.
I may pallet, and you're fucked.
Yeah. At this level, you could get a warning. This level, you get tickets. This level, you get towed. This level, you get shot. So
minor inconvenience to murder.
Yeah. And so I'm not saying that like policing doesn't need to be reviewed. I just think that these people we're gonna do away with it and replace it with what? Don't be a moron. Like, you're not ready for that infrastructure yet.
And I think it's easier, honestly, to fix something anytime than it is to start from new. You've already got that infrastructure. You already got this thing that exists. You just got to fix it. You just got to find out what the problems are and fucking fix it. And if it's something about the process in your intake that for some reason you keep getting more people that are of this type that are going to do these kind of things, well, then maybe that's where you need to start the refund.
Rehire.
You know, I don't know, but
Yeah.
there's
I got
solutions
tons
to
of
this.
ideas,
and
but
I think maybe it is even like it is more just making it open so it isn't such a, I don't know. I feel like if you have more community outreach and you're involved in all that kind of shit, that the need for everything to be treated like it is potentially a life or death physical situation kind of starts to slide. So you don't always have to have people that's what they can do. They got good hand-to-hand skills, or they can draw quick. It's like, no, they're really good at talking to people and connecting and understanding what a problem is when they get there and going, okay, well, how do we get you guys here? How do we get some counselors into your life to make sure that we can fix this problem, or some shit like that? But those aren't always the same people that can handle wrestling a fucking knife away from somebody when you come to the house.
I think we really, really need representative policing from the marginalized communities.
Sure.
We need to have people in the hood that are from the hood that can talk to people
Sure.
on a hood level and say, I understand. He's fucked with your manhood. You're furious right now. Do you want to go to jail over this? Or can we just fucking solve it right now? You know,
Well, hear me out now. This is starting to make me think that maybe we just need more cops. You add to it, so it's
the
like,
right cops.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? And it's a strength in numbers thing then too. You don't have two people going to check on a domestic dispute to see what's up, and then you have to both be on guard in case the guy does have a fucking gun for some reason and he's ready to kill everybody. You can have fucking 15 of them all show up at once, and you can all come there in a big group, and we can all talk it out and figure out what's going on, or however many, whatever number is enough to make it so it's not even a fucking physical concern anymore.
Or you do have two cops that are armed and trained, but you have a designated counselor who does all the talking
Well, see,
and
and I think
negotiating.
that's how a lot of that works in the UK, because they have people can't have guns there, so they don't treat everything like someone's gonna have a gun, and then when they do, then they deal with that accordingly, right? So I think that just getting that kind of in a fucking bit of a veer there into that kind of specificity. But yeah, there's lots of different ways if you're comfortable with adapting to deal with this kind of shit, right? You just gotta take your cues from what works at other places and get rid of the shit that don't.
That's one of the big things with the whole defund the police, that people are arguing that instead of spending the money on hiring more cops, training them in different ways, put that money towards, you know, the social problems that cause these crimes in the first place.
Sure.
So if
You want to
have-
fight crime? Stop crime.
Well, sorry, and to me, in my head, I'm picturing like basically a bunch of social workers is what you're hiring,
Right.
but that's what a cop is then. You know, a cop is basically a social
I don't think
worker.
a cop's job should be social work.
But I'm saying if you're going to change the paradigm and change the system,
Change
maybe
the
that is what it
system, right.
becomes. Maybe it's you don't need an enforcement officer. Maybe that's it becomes a much smaller part of their job because it becomes more about being a social worker. You know, I don't have any big fucking view of like how to prevent it is. I'm just spitballing here.
I do.
But please
I
don't
have it
hold me
all worked
accountable for Christ's sakes. Yeah. Dusty's pushing his goddamn social worker agenda again.
No, I agree. Well, fuck. Okay, so
So I think that's a big part of it, right? Like, and I think even most cops would agree that when they're dealing with people, it isn't always violent. It is just them talking to people and trying to sort it out. And if you're good at connecting with people and figuring out where the fuck they're from, well, then you can do that. But it is, like you were just saying, a lot easier to be that if you're from that neighborhood, too.
well,
the
who's,
whole community-led policing thing.
you were going to run for some office, and I want to get to that, but this is a segue. The NDP lady came. Segue. NDP lady came to my door, and she's like, "So, what do you want for your neighborhood?" And I'm like, "Well, you know what? You guys in the NDP, you're kind of interesting. You've got like people with nothing and people with a whole lot, and you ignore the middle people that have just enough. You know, you basically the left has thrown out the working class, and they don't give a shit. So I'm like, if you want the working class vote, you basically need to say we're going to fight crime and we're going to tax the rich." Those two slogans, you put them big, simple words, and people will get it. And she's like, "Well, I don't like that fight crime. It lets people think that, like, well, you don't have to tell them how you're fighting the crime. You're taking the money from the rich and you're putting it into social programs. They don't need to know that. If you see the crime statistics dropping, you fought crime. You don't have to put that money.
Right. That's what I'm saying, right? Whatever works, that's what you do.
You don't have to put the money into
fighting crime.
tanks and fucking
Yeah.
AR-15s for the cops. You put it into like education. You put it into trauma treatment. You put it into healthcare.
Yeah.
And
After school programs.
Yeah.
Cut down on youth crime. Get them playing fucking soccer and baseball and basketball.
That's how
and
we
hockey
fight
and-
crime. And you know
Heal
what?
the community.
The average guy in my neighborhood, and like at least in our circle, you know what I want out of a politician or out of a community? I want my kid to be safe at school. I want my truck to not be broken into when I wake up in the morning. I want my girlfriend to be safe to walk to the grocery store and to walk home. That's pretty simple. I want peace. I want to live in a peaceful society. How do we get that? By fighting crime. How do we fight crime? by creating less criminals to remove the situations that cause criminals. That's fucking simple.
And some people will stop right at that. Oh, okay, you want less crime? More cops. That
it.
Cop is going to come down and they'll, hammer fist on the person causing the crime. Like, no, wait.
You want better behaved children? Bigger sticks.
Yeah, there you go.
Bigger sticks, better behaved children. Until they become dads with bigger sticks. Yeah.
But instead of that, like that, did you end up reading that Ryan Miley book? Did
I looked at it. You did lend it to me, and I got to that. Like, okay, so it's health. That's what he wants.
I mean, that's basically it.
He wants better health care.
Yeah. He talks a lot about that Gabor Mate guy, and the same kind of thing. Like, deal with the trauma. If you can get to the root, right? Let's find the root. Because if we can start healing people from the root, then you can avoid the having to punish them later thing.
Well, it goes back. I've got this question, and I've asked you, and I've asked Dusty. I ask everybody I have these conversations with: how much are we obligated to drag somebody kicking and screaming that doesn't want to help themselves to a better world? And Ryan Miley talked about it in his books. He had this girl. She's a street worker, a sex worker, like hepatitis, HIV. She's on the way down, intravenous drug user, and every time she kind of crashes, shows up in the hospital he's working at. He's trying to help her, and then she takes off back into that system, back in, back out. But, I think that's because we don't have the allocated... I think that's the entire principle of his book, is we don't have the allocated, money or infrastructure to help those people in the way they need. We only have X amount of beds in rehab. We don't have the beds we need. We don't have X amount of beds in, youth crisis homes, right? Yeah. We don't have the beds we need. And if we had that, maybe people wouldn't be traumatized enough to get into these lifestyle choices.
Yeah, I mean, he can only help that lady so much, right? Mm-hmm. But if we had the right systems, then we can help the next little girl before she becomes that lady.
Or her kid or whoever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know. It's a tough one. I like his stuff because he's coming from a vantage point of being a doctor. And he's been, like, in his own way, he's got his boots on the ground. Yeah. He's coming from an area of privilege, but he's down there. Same thing with Gabor Mate with his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. What you reading? In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. He worked on East Hastings in the needle outreach and dealing with these people, and he found that almost 100% of the hardcore East Hastings junkies he dealt with had childhood trauma, or a series of childhood traumas that led them to that hardcore. So he's like, we need to figure out how to address the trauma
get there earlier
in order to heal or to avoid the trauma in the first place and give people safe spaces in order so that stuff doesn't come malignant. That's a lot of my stuff comes from. So you were thinking about getting into politics to some degree for a while there.
I've been kind of toying with the idea for a really long time, but I think like a big part of me is definitely scared off from it for a couple of reasons. One, I have a hard time like half-assing anything. So I know that if I'm going to do something, it's going to be like a huge commitment.
I can't relate.
And yeah, right. And so part of me was like, fuck, do I really want to like go down this road? And then another part of it too is just because of like my family's background. That part of me was like, I've seen where becoming a political activist goes wrong. And it just ends up being kind of like more harmful to your family than it was productive. I have a pretty good idea that in this country it would be productive.
Well, there's a lot of moderate political avenues for a person to get involved in.
Yeah, I don't think I'm moderate.
Well, I've been wondering for a long time, like, what's another way? What's another approach?
You kidding me? They know moderate, son.
Speaks
strapped with a gat since before he could walk.
Well, yeah. Straight up, what's up?
And you know what's funny, Jose, is the very first time I met you was at Pat's Cali class, and he paired me up with you, and I was a little intimidated because you're a fair bit like taller than me, and I thought you'd already been there like a whole bunch and already knew what you were doing. And then I couldn't believe how soft you were.
He's a gentle man.
I was just like, this is such a soft, gentle man. You know, that's exactly.
And here I am, a little fire plug.
Yeah. He's got the AK-47
5'7" of just like.
Yeah. So it makes me laugh.
Yeah.
But and I wonder too, like, do you think that if you did get involved in politics, that like your family's history, that people would try and use that as a negative too?
Oh, I'm assuming.
I see how one side definitely sees it as a positive, though. You're like, no, freedom fighters fighting the good fight against who was clearly a dictator. You know what I mean? When you're looking back in the history books, nobody's like, well, no, I mean Pinochet. There was good people on both sides. You know,
there's some quality people that were.
Yeah, Augusto knew some good guys.
Oh, you'd be surprised how many people have kind of tried to whitewash that history, though.
It's interesting. One time, an NDP person. Like, I have conversations with everybody that comes to my fucking door. It doesn't matter if you're a Mormon or like the NDP or the Conservatives hate me, but whatever, the NDP come.
Just lost.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with this one girl, and I'd known her from a couple like motorcycle runs, and you know, I'm like, hey, I know you, and she's like, hey, you're you. And when I actually started telling her my politics, she's like, you should get involved. And I'm like, you don't want me involved. You like, you know,
You
what
say
is it?
that now.
Smear
but,
politics, isn't that what it's called? Where they're just like, this is his past. Like, holy fuck, that's just a checklist, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. You want more glory holes? You're gonna get more glory holes.
so I'm just wearing my heart on my sleeve and just like, this is where I'm at. And you know, it's kind of funny because I
God,
really...
sorry.
Yeah.
Subtitle. You want more glory holes?
You want more glory holes? Glory holes for Canada. But yeah, so I actually went to one of the NDP meetings. She's like, you should come, you know, trust me, we have a lot of different people in these meetings. You probably fit right in. I'm like, you know,
right away you were like, what do you mean different?
well, you know, I'm a
Confrontational
biker,
shit.
I'm an ex-addict, I'm an ex-skinhead, you know, I'm involved with all kinds of shady history, I've got sketchy friends, you know, you don't want me. And she's like, you should really come. I'm like, okay, so I go to this meeting, ride my Harley down there, and I get off, I'm like, do, I walk in, boom, straight into somebody from the fetish scene that I've seen basically with an apple in his mouth and other things somewhere else, and I'm like... Nope. He even doesn't like me because I'm a little too rigid. I'm like, dude, did a 180 and just walked out, got on my bike and rode home.
Grandpa Simpson.
Yeah, and it's like, nope, not gonna happen. Yep. So I tried,
Like
but
the dog that used to turn around inside his own body, walking this way, spin around and his skin come out the other end.
I considered starting to volunteer for the Conservative Party, and then that way, when all my stuff gets pulled out, it just destroys them from the inside. And he was a skinhead and a drug addict.
Purposely become a cancer. Say, yeah.
I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get a big Scott Moe tattoo on your back.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Like Roger Stone with his Nixon. Once again, look into Roger Stone if you still haven't looked into Roger Stone. It's a very interesting story. We talked about that in one episode, and I was like, people don't know about Roger Stone. They got to know about him.
Yeah, definitely.
That is the troll of all trolls.
Buddy of Richard Nixon. Who was involved with the CIA in starting the whole coup in Chile.
See?
That guy.
There we go. It's all coming full circle.
Well, the last podcast we talked about one of the Nixon aides who finally came out and gave a soundbite straight up about how the war on drugs was orchestrated to put like anti-war movement and black activists in jail, right? Because then they could put these guys in jail when what they were actually saying was legally protected, but what they were doing they could criminalize. So yeah, it's very interesting. And you know, your dad's story, I kind of wonder about this movement to disarm a lot of people. You know, like, you could criminalize a lot of people by just taking away their firearms or suddenly giving you a huge list of things that are against the law. And if you keep owning these things, then you're going to be kicked out. Now, all of the specific arguments of whether or not, like, a person should have a right to have a centerfire, semi-automatic, potentially high-round magazine. You know, yeah, there are arguments that those are unnecessary for any civilian use. Well, what if they aren't for civilian use? What if they are legitimately to stop an oppressive regime from taking over, you know? Like, which ideally was what the Second Amendment was established for, right? But I don't think the average redneck in, like, Montana is prepared to take on the Marines.
Any color of neck, for that matter. You can have a green neck, it won't matter.
Yeah.
Green beret, you got a green neck.
Well, what they
So
say,
it's
you know, like
genetic,
the
though.
whole well-armed militia thing. Like, how well has that worked against the U.S. military?
Waco?
You know? You think a few of you are going to take, like...
You got a couple of
Because that's
nuclear
well, you know.
aircraft carriers parked out back.
Right? Like, that's worked well for other countries?
Oh, right. Well, it has. Vietnam were
I was
able
going to say
to...
one.
Yeah. Well, what happened with Afghanistan?
I mean, it's still...
They're still hiding in the mountains. Pew, pew, pew.
Yeah.
Right? So I think people that are pew, pew, pew. Well, you know, like making bombs out of like fertilizer and spray paint. Come on, you know, that's some ingenuity. I'm not saying that what they're doing is right, because I totally support the U.S. military-industrial complex. iPhone, I totally support the U.S. military-industrial complex. But
You're already banned. You don't need
yeah,
to do
fuck,
that.
they won't let me go into the USA. But
They have to come get you.
yeah, right. I love Canada. Fuck, I love Canada. But yeah. So a people with a heart and a willpower can do a lot of things. The French Resistance is a perfect example. You know, like they were able to hold off the Nazis at least until the Allies came and were able to liberate. So, you know, that's ideally what the Second Amendment is. There are groups
Is
that
that
are.
what the fall is going to be like?
What fall?
Is that where, yeah.
Oh, you mean the season?
You think
Or
we're
the
getting through
fall.
August? Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
like the huge fall of the systems. I'm like, oh,
What do
okay.
you mean see in September? What are you talking about?
Yeah, September. No, that's gonna be by then. It's gonna be like Mad Max. We're fighting for gas, and we got the hockey masks and like our sex slaves strapped to the back of our motorcycles.
Yeah.
I'm almost there. I'm almost there already.
You say you got the gear for it.
Yeah, I got the gear, got the motorcycle, got the sex slaves. You know, we're good. No. So I wanted to ask you about people in Canada right now that say that racism doesn't exist.
Yeah, I don't understand how people couldn't see it. Like, I get that maybe.
I don't think they do.
I think some people obviously don't want to admit it to themselves, but just like that complete reluctance to even have the conversation is something that kind of blows my mind. I kind of look to.
I don't know how anybody can legitimately believe that.
Legitimately, yeah, I don't know.
I don't think they do. I think
well,
it's just a.
I think a lot of people will
slogan.
say it used to happen. You know, that was a long time ago. When I was in high school.
Pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
Yeah, that whole stuff, right? In 1996, I would have been in like grade 9 or 10 or something. We're sitting in school, and all of a sudden there's an announcement that the last residential school just closed in Canada.
Oh, it was 96? Or no, in the
Pretty sure.
90s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was 96 or 97. I'm pretty sure it was 96. And that was in this province. So when I was in high school, the last residential school in this country closed, and it was in this province. We all kind of looked at each other like, these things are still happening? Like they're still
Right.
going? Yeah.
I don't think people even know what they are.
Hey,
Like
well,
settler
like,
culture?
like you're going to school in Germany, hey, and it's like the mid '90s, and they're like, so the last concentration camp
Right?
was shut down.
Like,
You're like,
this
no,
is still
that was
happening?
that was decades ago.
Yeah.
That's over, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
And
wow.
actually, when I was
No?
talking to you about the videos that I want to do, one of them kind of led me down a little research trail of looking into this stuff and just like how recently in our past, you know, these things had happened. Like the last residential school closing, all of these things would have been in our parents' lifetime for sure, and some of them maybe our grandparents. Like
Well,
at
the
the
60s
end.
scoop.
But yeah, like I think it was in the 50s is when Indigenous people were allowed to start voting
Yeah.
in Canadian elections.
They weren't allowed to have legal representation to protect their
No,
rights or
yeah.
to fight for rights.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to hire lawyers, let alone become one themselves, you know, like, so you can't learn about the system that you're in. You can't fight against the system that you're in. You can't participate in the system that you're in,
You need a piece of paper from the Indian agent on the reserve to leave the reserve.
right? Which is how the RCMP was founded, to prevent them from doing that. And so, you know, in a sense, a different form of slave catchers, like we were talking about the police in the U.S.
Not slave catchers, but indigenous wranglers.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And so that's another system that needs to
That
be
might have been insensitive,
revamped.
that combination of words, but you know.
Dude, what
But,
was just
you know,
rolling through my head right now, I was like, don't say any of it, don't say any of it, don't say any of it. It's terrible, all of it, yeah.
But that's why you need to start looking at these systems. Like, can you imagine another one? I think 68, if I remember correctly, was when Indigenous people were first allowed to apply for mortgages to own a home. Before that, if you wanted to, like in reservations to this day, you don't own your home. That is the government leasing it out to you. So you can't use it for like income or collateral. You know how like if you wanted to, you could go use your mortgage to like, get a car. or,
That's one
like-
of the biggest like white racist tropes. Is like you're given a home, you're given this stuff on the reserves, you're given a check every month, and
Yeah.
like I don't think they even have a clue what actually that was.
No,
what that system
yeah.
is.
And so then imagine, like I know when I was a kid, the whole home ownership was a big thing, right? You get a job. Your job is to so you can be a provider, so you can have that security of having your own home, your own little plot of land, right? Your lot here, and that's something that you can use for being able to all kinds of stuff. Buy a
Well, that's
car.
a
use
profoundly
it.
colonial mentality too.
The whole yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what we were taught, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so imagine being in that system and not being able to do that. Your
Yeah.
parents aren't going to teach you that because it was never part of their life. It was never reality for their parents or themselves. All of a sudden, they're like, okay, now, like, why even get a job if you're not ever going to be able to buy your own house if that's one of the major goals of society? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things that just, like, systemically break down the entire chain of command here. You know what I mean?
I think there's a profound difference between the cultural mindsets of a colonial British mindset with the hierarchies, with the property, the land ownership, with legalese, with economy, rolling into a holistic mindset of we live in harmony with our environment. We are actually part of this ecosystem. We are not above this ecosystem.
Right, yeah.
There is no land ownership. There's no people ownership. There's no animal ownership. Well, maybe to some degree with horses and stuff like that, but we coexist, right? And then comes this dominance system, a hierarchy system that's a don't worry. And like John A. McDonald, dun, 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 dun,
I've seen your little hand movements.
but when you think about it, John A. McDonald comes along and he starts like negotiating treaties with these people, saying, "Don't worry, we're going to create an amalgamation of the British culture and the indigenous culture. We're going to have this new world. We're going to trade. It's going to be great. Trust us. Just sign these treaties. We're going to move this railroad across the country. Progress is going to come. Technology is going to come. You're going to eat well. You're going to be fed. Blah blah blah." Now suddenly, you can't leave these little areas we set up just until things work out. Just until we can amalgamate these societies. And anybody who stands up and says, no, this is wrong, well, that's a rebellion and we're going to execute you. And that gives us more reasons to put you into tighter constrictions on these reserves. Yeah. And you know what? For the betterment of everybody, we're going to take your kids and we're going to train them in the colonial way. Now, that's some pretty fucked up. That's straight up indoctrination. That is a concentration re-education camp. That's all that is. Legitimate re-education camps. And we talk about in Germany how that's so atrocious, and in Russia and all these China, where they're taking Muslim people and they're shoving them into re-education camps. That's exactly what they did to the indigenous people, and look at the trauma it caused.
Yeah.
You know, so
well, that's when you get into arguments with people about the whole genocide thing, right? Is Canada still involved in a genocide against indigenous people?
Well, they think it's a physical death.
Yes. And part of the definition is erasing the culture. Yeah. How many indigenous people do we know that still speak their native language?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that part of the culture is gone. What is culture, right?
Yeah, and
music,
not of their
language,
choice. Yeah,
dance,
it was taken away from them and replaced with something else. You know, you could learn it at any time, but it's like, well, no, like when you were spoken it, you were beaten and told not to, so they just never spoke it ever again and never passed it on. Like, and you did it in one generation. You wiped it all out.
Yeah, they did kill a lot of people, but I don't think that that's the genocide they're talking about. Yeah. I think the genocide they're talking about is a cultural genocide.
Yes.
Yeah, you erase language in one generation.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I mean, even the fallout from it through just even suicide. There's so much higher rates of it in those communities because of the fallout from those exact issues.
I'm happy that my daughter's generation is learning about this in elementary school. She was 6 years old when she came home and said, "Daddy, what would you do if somebody came for me and said they were taking me away till I was 18? And she's 6, literally. She asked this question. I'm like, "Oh, Daddy, you'd be in jail."
I'd be bathed in blood in the moonlight,
right?
Sweet pea.
Yeah. And she's like, and I talked to my buddy Randy, who's the indigenous prof at the U of S, and he's like, "Oh yeah, there was a lot of imprisoned and like murdered or shot indigenous people trying to protect their children from being stolen by the government, you know." But I think the settler culture hasn't put that. What would I do if somebody came to take my 6-year-old away from me? One friend, I forget who, I said, imagine the Chinese communists roll in and they say, "We're going to take your children to re-education camps. You're no longer speaking English. They're going to be raised on communist, manifesto. They're going to learn like our new social program." And how many people would be like, "No, that's not going to happen. I'm going to go underground. I'm going to fight." Yeah. "Oh, you are now rebellion. You are now in these camps, these re-education camps." How atrocious would that be when your children were taken away? And what would happen when your kids got back at age 18? And tried to assimilate into that society. And they're either brainwashed by this communist, dogma, and they're not even speaking their language. You can't communicate with them anymore. If you try to go see them, you're either shot or imprisoned. If you leave your area to go to the camps that your kids are kept in. That's some fucked up shit, man. But people don't internalize that and say, how would I react if it happened to me? Right? And they can't see that it did. And it does happen to other people all the time. And we're dealing with the consequences of it.
You get the reaction of, that's why they say, "Oh, but that was a long time ago. Like, why do we still have to be talking about it now? Like, that was 2 generations. No. 20 years ago.
That was Dad. Grandpa.
Yeah.
No. Why aren't you functionally?
Yeah.
Brutal.
So I remember asking you, and I guess it's my own privilege showing through. I'm like, has anybody ever pulled that "go back to your own country" when they were mad at you? And the fact that I'm like, I never even clued in that would have happened really shows that I'm coming from a certain vantage point of a privileged person that's never had to deal with that shit, right?
Yeah, I think that's what the smart kids called microaggressions, right?
Okay. Fuck
Ask,
smart
like,
kids.
things like
Hot take on smart kids. That's hot take.
I remember when I was a kid, somebody said that to me. They were like, go back to where you came from. And in my head, I was like,
Winnipeg?
yeah, like that doesn't, it didn't make
I mean,
sense.
that hurts a little bit, but I mean, I don't know why I would do that.
Right? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. Or the whole, like, oh, so, like, what nationality are you? I'm like, I'm Canadian. Like, no, but where were you born? In Winnipeg. Okay, but, like...
What's your heritage?
Yeah, what's your
Yeah.
heritage? I'm like, I don't know what you're... I'm
Fuck,
Canadian.
man, if you got
I don't
asked
know.
3 times, just give
Right.
up, right? Like,
So eventually I
Do
came
you
to
speak
realize...
any languages other than English?
I'm like, why don't you just say what you mean? Why are you brown? Like,
Well, how
that's
does
what you want to
okay,
ask.
let me
Ask,
ask
why
this.
are you
Okay,
brown?
what if somebody is legitimately interested in the culture that you're from, like your roots? What is a sensitive way of breaching that topic? You know?
See, I'm not really sure because... So, ethnicity. What is ethnicity? That's your culture, right? Your language, your heritage.
food,
like
your
that.
music,
Yeah.
your.
So, I'm ethnically Canadian. Born, raised here.
I
Like,
don't speak Spanish. Though.
well, honestly,
So I know more
sorry,
languages than
when
you do.
Pat
Yeah,
was
you
saying,
do.
like,
But that's it. We
Yeah.
dress the same. We
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
the same. We listen
Same
to
values.
the same music.
We
same
believe in the
values.
same right and wrong. Yeah.
If somebody's listening to this conversation right now with no video, and we hadn't talked about where
Yeah,
my
your
family
history.
came from and all that stuff, there's no way that they would be able to say, well, other than my name, I guess, that
Well, you
I'm
do
brown
sound pretty
and that you're
normal.
white. You know what? Yes. And oh man, the whole you're so well spoken. Like your English is so good.
Aw.
for someone who grew up in Saskatoon,
Right? Like why
do you
wouldn't
mean?
it be? But yeah, like that kind of stuff is
brutal.
I mean, and it's still every once in a while I work somebody, the whole. So where are you from? Or so how long have you been here? Like, what do you mean?
Oh man, yeah. yeah.
Well, like, and when we were talking about having you on, and Pat was saying, he's like, yeah, the story of his parents is crazy about how they came here, and I'm like, I didn't even clue in. You know what I mean?
I didn't even know how crazy.
You know what I mean? I'm like, when you come here, like, I just assumed they're
The
from
little I
here,
knew
you know?
was
Like,
crazy. This
Aren't
is
you
like-
just from here? I didn't know. You know,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, no. Well,
Well,
not that you
actually,
weren't
I asked
from
my
here.
mom for permission to
Crazy
talk about
story.
some of this stuff
Oh, very good.
because for the
I was kind of
longest
wondering
time-
partway through here. I'm like, fuck, are we gonna get somebody in trouble? Like,
Yeah,
Knock,
no,
knock,
I
knock.
asked. I mean, for the first few years when we were here, like we were getting, yearly visits from CSIS just to make sure that things were going well.
That's the Canadian Security Intelligence Service for
Yes.
people that aren't familiar. I don't know why that
And,
rolls off my tongue so quickly.
Yeah, everybody was on a list for a while. I'm pretty sure most of my aunts and uncles aren't allowed to travel into the States.
Is
I
that
remember-
a bad thing? Because I spent the last several years wondering. There's a million other places in the world to go. I don't need to visit New Orleans or LA.
One year when the royal family came through Canada to visit, and they were coming through Saskatoon, and officers showed up at my uncle's house, and they were like, "So this weekend, where are you guys planning on being?" We're like, "What? What do you mean?" They're like, "Yeah, so we're gonna need an itinerary from you for that day." And if one of you is caught driving outside of that parameter, you're going to get in trouble. And also, between 1 and 3 p.m., you can't be downtown.
no way.
So
True story.
That's wild.
is that because a colonizing monarch is in, the figurehead of all colonization?
Yeah,
is
they're-
gonna
my
be in
family
town?
is very anti-imperialistic.
Hmm.
They have issues with that kind of stuff just across the board.
I am anti-imperialistic, and I'm working on myself. And we talk about this all the time. That's what it sums up on a macro level and on a micro level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like being bullied. I don't like people violating my consent. So I do my best to try and not violate other people's consent.
Yeah.
And it can be on just a conversation, monopolizing a conversation. We joke about it because we're both so talkative.
Well, you talked about with your dog.
Yeah,
Something
even my
strong,
dog
like,
standing on me. I'm like, how much of a right do I have to tell her to get off of me?
on
But-
every level.
But this also carries over to the imperialism of police having this authority. Who gave them the authority? The government. Who gave our government authority? The monarchy. Who gave the monarchy authority? Some myth of divine God. Like,
That's right.
so when you really boil it down, guess what? I don't think God
Lizard
gave you
blood.
authority over me.
Yeah.
Well, that gets heavy, right?
Well, I was hoping it was gonna slip by lizard blood.
Lizards? No, I don't. I saw your eyes shift there, motherfucker.
Momentarily.
One of my uncles got called he had to testify for something. And so he goes to court and they're like, okay, we need you to put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you're going to tell the truth. I don't believe in God. oh, okay, then we need you to swear by the queen that you're gonna tell the truth. And he's like, I don't bow
Accept her
down to that.
authority.
Yeah, I don't accept her authority. Or like, well, do you just promise to tell the truth then? He's like, yeah, I can do that.
Those are
Absolutely.
really valid things, and
sure
I
you
don't
tell
know
the
why
truth
more
when
people
you
don't talk about them. Like, sorry, I don't accept that authority. Like, what authority do you have to be pushing this arbitrary law that I didn't agree to? I didn't give consent to. So that's one of the major problems I have living in the society that we do. How much have I consented to living by these standards that you're arbitrarily pushing upon me?
Like that is an odd thing to still do though, right? Like hand on book,
Oh, yeah.
swear. You know what I mean? Like that's an
Yeah.
odd thing. It's like when you're at that point, isn't it like, well, no, you know you're supposed to be telling the truth. You're gonna lie if you're gonna fucking lie. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like hand on Bible ain't gonna make a bit of difference. I didn't kill that man.
Well, it depends on how much you've been indoctrinated into that mythology, and how much
I
your
guess.
subconscious is like, I'm going to burn eternally if I don't do this thing. Because colonists would literally burn your family in front of you for not accepting this thing, and you saw the pain, and it got passed
There
down.
you go. That's what I'm saying. Replace the Bible thing with maybe you light somebody's like uncle on fire. Then.
Will you? Do you want to be uncle?
Hey, you like this? You like this?
What if I'm the
Charbroiled. Yeah. Well, I'm saying it's rough on uncles, but I'm an uncle too.
Well, a lot of like pre-colonial cultures, and it doesn't need to be Canadian Indigenous. It could be, like I don't know what is it called, Latin? No, pre-Latin. It's not Hispanic. It's Spanish. Is all of that is like colonial terms. Mesoamerican, would that be it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so pre-colonial Mesoamerican cultures, they had this other view of where authority came from. Whether it's like our community chose our leaders and our community made the rules versus it's been decreed from the top down. Although different cultures had that whole God King trip, which like God gave us the laws and you do what God's laws. But
That's a good gig if you can get it.
yeah, being the interpreter of God's will.
Yeah.
The interpreter. Yeah.
The only
Yeah,
one.
democracy comes in many ways.
Well, dudes are on the top. Straight dudes are on the top.
That whole hierarchical system.
Right? Everybody else just do what the straight dudes say, and like these are the laws of God.
Actually goes well into the first video that I'm going to be putting out on why white supremacy is the worst.
Why white supremacy is the worst?
Yeah.
Oh man.
This,
Yeah.
and I don't know why I just got caught up. I just remembered your meme real quick. The wrecking ball.
Oh, the
The Canadian wrecking ball. You got Miley Cyrus's body and you're all
They
happy.
say white supremacy. That I remember that hillbilly woman trying to like, I'm going to show you by making you this catchy gif, and you're going
Oh
to
my
be
god, that thing was amazing.
shared around by everybody.
So Jose pissed off the wrong person on Twitter and by having a comment on American policy from a Canadian. Is
Yeah.
that it?
Yeah, that was basically it. Yeah, they were just upset that a Canadian had a take on what they're doing. And so she she said something about a Canadian crashing into, our conversation with their opinions. And they made a gif out of me as the, Miley Cyrus wrecking ball
With a big
thing.
smiling
but
Jose
my
face.
head on her head.
Very erotic.
Well, I found it very flattering. Like
Yeah.
Jose's having a fun time just destroying their shit. It was great.
He's like, this seems appropriate. Yeah,
This is
that's
so
that's what I
cool.
feel like doing this. Thanks, guys. I've never felt more beautiful while slamming into your conversation.
Piss all over your hopes and dreams here. Mhm.
On the internet.
Well, yeah, like it makes me laugh, and I'm so happy that we finally got you on. I'd love to get you on for some more. I like our conversations at work, and I knew. Well, we sit at work, and we tattoo them, have these conversations regularly, and clients are like, "You guys should really record some of the conversations that go on here at work." And my brother's like, "No,
No.
nothing that goes on in this shop will ever be put on like." So to me, I'm like, "Well, fuck." So when we had the opportunity,
Like, there can be no evidence, no historical record.
Once again, the voice of reason.
well, one reason, but you got to take a risk. Like, I think that our conversation is putting one narrative out there, one idea. I'd like to say that, like, we have been damaged guys. Well, I know I have been. I assume that you're in that same boat, and I think Jose's
I'm fine.
unpacking a lot of his. I think Jose's unpacking a lot of his stuff too, and in the process of unpacking our stuff, we're having conversations about how we're trying to be better. And it, like when it comes to race relations and actually asking honest questions and hearing people's stories, but also when it comes to our own privilege. We had some commentary recently from a couple different people about this being a boys' club.
Oh yeah.
And that we need more female voices for unpacking our male toxicity and our own trauma and our own damage as men. As like, you know? But I'd like to think that, I don't know, I'm a damaged white boy. Or a white man that's trying to be less of a boy.
You're a dirty white boy.
Dirty white boy. But like, when we're having our conversations, I would like to think that we're talking to other dudes like us and trying to give them a vantage point that, like, from guys of our background, hey, here's Jose from Chile. This is what it's like over there, you know, and this is my
Some
deal.
shit you weren't exposed to. Like.
Oh man, I could pull down an old, gay Leatherman who's been around forever and get him down here and like, let me tell you about, San Francisco in the 70s. But they don't want to hear those stories.
Pack your poppers.
They don't. Yeah,
Oh, I think some people want to hear those stories.
Yeah, but we're all freaks, Jose.
I mean, especially isn't it Pride Month right now?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I
those
think
are
it's
important
Pride
stories to hear.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that whole checking your privilege thing, right?
Yeah.
They're
Hey,
well,
look at
the
this.
whole-
Hey, look at this fucking guy.
15 seconds, eh? Fuck.
yeah, but all of that stuff, like gay people had to fight for their rights, you know.
Well, it was a riot.
Mm-hmm.
Stonewall, right? You
Yeah.
know, I'm not sure. It was a combination. I think it was drag queens and SM people that really started the Stonewall riot that fought back the police that went in there and tried to arrest people.
A lot of trans people too.
I'm not sure if it was trans back then, when that stuff went down so much. But
Well, I think a big part of the drag world back then was trans people.
But they just were pre-identity or identifying as it were. They were calling transsexual versus
Right.
transgendered.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that stuff
but-
is very important because, like, I don't know. I used to consider
That is actually a good reason why to have someone of that voice on,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because us on the outside looking in, I can do my best at guessing, but I'm not part of that world, so it'd be interesting to hear that.
Well, it's weird because I went into that world as like a very staunchly straight guy. You know what I mean? And then I had some experiences that really challenged my hard and fast straight guy, self-perception. And I consider myself flexible because who knows about the right situation, the right individual. I've been to Philippines, and the most beautiful girl I saw apparently had a penis. You know what I mean? So if I'm halfway through that and all of a sudden, ding, I'm like, well, am I going to finish? I don't know. So
We were having a conversation the other day about early 2000s Davey Havoc from AFI, and I mean, it's hard not to be conflicted. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a pretty
I
man.
was in Brazil
prettiest I've
once,
ever
and
seen, maybe.
We were in Brazil and saw some really pretty,
Yes.
Brazilian women. You been in Brazil?
No, I just saying how he's attracted to Davey
Oh.
Havoc.
But yeah, I saw this guy's like, oh, check out these girls on the sidewalk here. And I was like, God damn, Brazilian women are gorgeous. That's insane. And he starts laughing. He's like, yeah, they're not women. Like,
That's the Philippines. That's the
Like, oh.
Philippines for me.
Well, I mean,
And you were like, fine. Yeah. You were like, and you're like, that's okay.
apparently it doesn't
Pull
matter
over.
that
What
much.
the fuck are we doing here?
Well, I read somewhere, and I really like this, is the heterosexual attitude towards homophobia is directly in relation to a male's attitudes towards women.
I can see it.
Where they don't want a man to treat them like they implicitly would treat a woman in their subconscious, right?
I'm
So,
emphatically pointing at Pat right now. If anyone can't see this, fully agreeing him with my full body.
well, right,
Yeah,
like
right,
if
'cause
you're
that's your paradigm. That's how I
they
treat
don't wanna be
the
treated
opposite
like that.
sex or the people that I'm sexually attracted to. So obviously, the person who's sexually attracted to me is going to treat me that
the
way.
same way,
Yeah.
and like fuck them, like that tells you a lot about you, man.
I need to-
Yeah, no doubt.
You don't want to date a guy that's got that attitude. If that's your attitude towards sexuality, is that your fear and like anger immediately? Like, maybe not get involved with that dude, right?
Check it out.
And doing that
That
self work,
looked
right? And doing that self work and examining our own attitudes towards sexuality and gender across the board, right? And I had to come to terms with that when I was involved in the kink community because the kink community is entirely based around power exchange. Who has power and who's relinquishing power and how much is allowable to adopt over somebody else, right? How much surrender is being consented to. And one of the worst things you can be in the kink community is a consent violator. You don't ever want to violate somebody's consent. So these conversations get put on the forefront. It's like, hey, I'm interested in you. Sorry, I'm not interested. Cool, thanks. That's all that conversation needs to be. And if the guy keeps going, well, I'm really interested in you, I don't think you heard my no. And it doesn't matter what gender that is. Like if somebody's being a pushy individual or identity, you could be a top And a bottom won't leave you alone. I really want you to top me. I really want you to top me. Yeah, why aren't you paying attention to me? You're violating my consent right now. I said no. You're not taking no for an answer. And it doesn't matter who's got what parts, an innie and outie, what they dress like. Consent is such a huge part of that paradigm, or a part of that narrative. And I think that's what really pivots down. The kink community taught me so much about this stuff. But I tend to take things to the nth degree of analyzation and hyper-focus. So.
That's good, though. You got a lot of questions that you need answered.
I think so. Like, how much do we consent to engage with individuals? And are we good at setting our boundaries when we don't?
That's huge. That's huge, especially when you look at, like a patriarchal system that we live in. Women aren't taught that they're allowed to do that.
Well, because there's also a huge amount of that system which punishes that which sets boundaries.
Yeah.
Like and it carries over. It doesn't matter if you're a politician or a cop or the boss in a workplace. As soon as somebody says, "I have an issue with something that happened," is punishment immediately going to follow?
It's the power structure.
Yeah, and that's a reinforced power structure that we think is normal. And then it's us. It's us. I've got a right to lose my temper when I don't get my way.
Right.
and like, it blows my mind. So if some dude hits it on me, I'm like, sorry, man, not really into you. You're not my type. Thanks, cool.
It should be that simple.
I have one good friend. He's like, I'm not Pat's type. Has nothing to do with an innie or an outie, but that's just like, I don't think that's gonna do it for me. That's all that really needs to be said. Why is it any different than a girl who's just like, a guy hits on a girl? Sorry, not my type. But at the same time, I've taught women self-defense classes, and I need to make it clear to them that I'm washing my hair tonight, maybe another time, is not a no. It's actually leaving the door open to ask another time. You need...
Guys like that aren't good at taking hints.
Yeah.
Anybody who's functioning is like, I get it. Cool.
Well,
catch you when I catch you, I guess. But anybody else is like, okay, well they're just busy this week then. I'll just get a hold of them right afterwards. You're done washing your hair, what, like 10:30? You drive about midnight?
I'll come back. I'll come back.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And that's a tough one because on the other side, we also live in a society where it's dangerous for a woman to say no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's this, I think it was a Twitter account or maybe an Instagram account, and it was called By Felipe as opposed to Friday's By Felicia. And By Felipe documented dudes that suddenly got violently aggressive as soon as they were turned down on a social media dating app.
Instantly.
Yeah, it's like from like, sorry, not into you, you fucking bitch, and holy cow, where does this come from? All right, we're at the 2-hour mark here. We'll go a little bit longer. Or are we going to kind of wind it down? Are you going to come?
Cool to keep going.
I got nowhere to be.
conversations,
I got
right?
the weather's still garbagey, probably. I'm really enjoying this thus far.
So, okay, there's this
Yeah,
thing.
as long as you guys are still finding it interesting, I'm good to keep talking.
Oh, I want you back. I love you, man. Like, you're my bro from another mo.
Like, we didn't even get to talk about any of the things you guys have in common. You know what I mean? Like that's why I have you on. Like, hey, you guys will talk some tattooing and whatnot, and we'll just get into every other fucking thing.
I just don't say the things out loud that I have in common. Jose knows in my heart of hearts that we are of kindred spirits.
are.
Yes.
It's actually really funny because I guess back like 10, 12 years would have been when I kind of first started knowing of Pat, just because of the whole tattoo community. And I knew of him as the angry tattooer from Rites of Passage. Rites of Passage was kind of like not like an aggressive shop. You know what I mean? There was the shops that were trying to be artistic and that kind of thing, and then Rites of Passage was like the aggressive shop. Like you went there if you had to be kind of a not grimy, but like a tough dude if you were gonna get tattooed at that shop.
Ironworks Gym on 8th Street. There?
Yes,
I'm back at Ironworks. I love that place.
The tattoo
Rites of
equivalent
Passage was the Ironworks of tattooing. And so I was like, okay, cool. I mean, that shop does great work, but it's probably a little,
Hardcore?
Yeah, a little hardcore for me. But I started meeting the guys at conventions, and I'm like, man, these guys are awesome. Like, I just get along so well with them. But I'm doing, my apprenticeship is going well at the time, and I thought, I'm in a good shop. Like, it didn't even cross my mind. And then when that apprenticeship ended, I was like, okay, well, now I kind of need to, figure out what shop I do want to work at. And Graham is an amazing artist. Pat's been in the game for, at that time, would have been, 15 years or something.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to give him a call and see what's going on. And I'm scrolling through social media, and I see a picture of Pat wearing a Screwdriver shirt. I'm like, Well, he's met me before, and
I'm a shit disturber. I'm an intentional shit disturber because like that stuff will put conversations on the table. And actually, I was grabbing a friend of mine's head and shoving it in my lap at the same time in that photo.
Oh, I was focused on the shirt. I didn't.
Yeah, it's
I was like, well, he knows I'm brown, right? So this shirt, how much is it? Just the music he likes, or the mess? I'm not
or
sure.
just pissing people off.
Or just
That's kind of
He's a
it.
fan of the Tool.
Maybe he just
Yeah,
enjoys
yeah.
a good Phillips, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Phillips head,
Loves
screwdriver.
Neil Robertson.
Yeah.
Right, Canadian Robertson.
Well, you know what? I grew up on it. And actually, I've sent you Screwdriver lyrics. I'm like, do you disagree with anything in this? And you're like, no, I don't.
That's what I said. Like I would have been a skinhead if just wrong skin shade.
You know what? And
My
I look at
ancestors
those.
were out in the sun longer than Pat's, and
Yeah, there's a bit more of evolution that happened.
but philosophically,
Wait, what? No, we're all same levels of evolution, Pat. They've got different paths.
No, you know
Same
what?
levels.
I seem to think that there's certain conversations that need to be put on the table that are taboo right now, and I won't do it right here. But that being said, I really believe that a lot of those racialist skinheads are misguided to the real situation going on. They've been fed a bullshit line, and because everybody that's involved with that fringe politics or that radical revolutionary kind of politics knows that there's something wrong with this system.
yes,
And they haven't just figured out what it actually is yet.
yeah,
And
the
that was-
frustration is valid.
yeah, and I think that's just it. And so there's a real frustration. Everybody wants a better world, and they just haven't figured out exactly. And they're too busy. They're pointing their finger sideways instead of
Yep.
pointing it up and
Well,
saying,
like the
who's
whole-
really running the show?
The 14 words should only be 13.
That's what I think. Exactly. All children. Or 14, just put all instead of white. You know, we must fight to secure a future for all children.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. I don't even remember the 14 words.
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to be careful because this is public. I can't really make a lot of my jokes that I would make with Jose if we were alone. But that's just it. And then I realized.
Say that for the Patreon page.
That's right.
Oh, God. Yeah,
Jose alone cut.
But and that's just it. I like to do things that challenge people's comfort zones and to drag them out. And if you're too offended by it, I guess you missed the point. You know what I mean? And hey, if you see me doing something offensive, want to have a conversation, let's get to the truth of it. Because too many people are looking for a villain right now. Cool, I'll be the anti-hero. I'm good at being the anti-hero because I don't give a fuck if you don't like me. And Jose, when he started working with us, realized that I was actually not the guy that, like, my reputation preceded me. You know, there's this weird reputation surrounding, like, furious, angry, blah, 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 aggressive, hardcore. And then you
I thought you
actually...
would have been taller.
Yes! I met people in my like early 20s that are like, you're Pat? Oh my
Where's
God.
the rest of you?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the rest of you? And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
fuck. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
then it starts going around that maybe you just lost your shins like the grandpa in fucking King of the Hill. Hey, machine gun accident, that's what it was.
so yeah, when Jose was working with me, we started talking politics, and he was kind of, he was just honest. He's like, dude, I thought you were straight up racist. I heard about your skinhead shit. I saw your Screwdriver shirt. And I'm like, yeah, well, realistically, this is what I believe. And we started talking, and he encouraged me to actually become more vocal about my real politics and my real philosophies, and we realized that we were on the same fucking page, and that's what really kind of made me laugh. There's a couple times you're like, I really want to come up with like a multicultural patriot organization where we go out and maybe like stand against the Sons of Odin, and I'm like, dude, I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. I'm not gonna go there. Not organizing. Not getting involved. And but I really think that this is probably one of the best ways to talk about that stuff, to unpack a lot of that stuff, because I'm not ashamed of where I am. I've done things that I regret that I would have done differently with the vantage point I have now, but I wouldn't be here now if I hadn't have gone through those phases, whatever they were, right?
Yeah, I feel like everybody can say that.
Well, they should be able to say that.
Should be able to say that, yeah.
You'd be surprised how many people I meet that are like, we don't talk about that. Don't mention that part of my life, you know? There's been one buddy of mine in Montreal. I went out to visit him. Like, remember we had no hair and braces, boots and braces? Like, no, I don't. Like, cold face. Like, no. And I'm like, okay. I'm looking around at his new group of friends. I guess you revamped yourself when you moved here. And then another buddy, I'm like, in his wedding, and I'm like his best man. He's like, you do not say anything about my life before about 4 or 5 years ago. Does she know? Has she seen your tattoos? She knows like the huge pentagram on your back. She knows like she's seen the back of you, right?
Maybe not.
He's constantly just angling on her. Hey,
Yeah.
she can only see his
Hey,
front.
honey, we're doing missionary again.
Yeah, can't have full-length mirrors in the house just in case she catches it. Right? No, they're just a fucking headlight. That's all you get.
Right?
The rest of you is beautiful. What more do you need to know?
See, and I think if people could just like, talk about that stuff and unpack it. Well, what is that? That's one of those like, socially justice terms. Unpacking.
Is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I'm gonna unpack social work, social. Let's unpack that for a moment and just put it all on the table. You call it dumping out your purse, right?
Oh, yeah.
Dumping out your purse.
Dump out my purse on the
See
table.
what's in there.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
Talk about all that stuff.
It all comes out. It's like from the nooks and crannies, if you will.
Right? Like, oh shit, I forgot about that.
Well, and have you talked about it to yourself? That's a big part.
That
you
is a
know?
big one, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know it's there. You put it there. It's your purse. You know what I mean?
Oh, there's some stuff that I fully believe
Who
people
slipped this in my
hide,
purse?
they hide well enough that they forget that's in there.
Yeah, I'd rather be the grimy guy that does good things than the pretend good guy that's got a whole bunch of skeletons in his closet. You know what I mean?
What pays more, though?
It's not economically viable.
Yeah.
But let's see. Okay, so I recently Donald Trump down in the States is a movement, and the new movement is the Against Antifa movement.
Right, yeah.
Against Antifa. And I saw a meme that I really want to talk about for a second. And so if you look at it, Against Antifa means against anti-fascism.
Right.
Against anti-fascism, which is grammatically a double negative. So we got to change the against anti to being in support of.
To just fall.
Yeah, we're for fascism. So if you're against Antifa, you're against anti-fascism, which means you are actually for fascism, which is an interesting thing for a president to
To embrace. To...
center his rallies around.
Right.
Yeah, and there's also some documented, proven websites where the Donald Trump Army, the Trump Army, he's
Yeah.
recruiting, and these are the terms. You got to be boots on the ground, provide security. I'm coming from a history where I know that other political leaders, maybe Germany in 1929, established personal armies to fight communists and rioting in the streets, and they wanted them to be armed, and sometimes they had blackjacks and billy clubs, and they
Brown shirts.
Yeah, brown shirts and the stormtroops, And eventually they were killed off and replaced by a more elite guard. But this is history repeating itself, and people don't see it.
That's khakis and polos.
Oh fuck yeah, whatever it is, exactly. The Ben Sherman shirts and all of that, the tiki torches. These guys are fucking Nazis. That's it. I said it out loud, and I'm coming from a guy who used to wear screwdriver
Pat's hot
shirts.
take.
Yeah, these guys are fucking straight up Nazis. I'm calling it what it is.
Yeah, a lot of people they want to dissect the, what does that actually mean? Is that person really, do they believe in Nazism, or is this something else?
Maybe not yet.
Yeah, but why, okay, so do we need to every single time call it ethno-nationalism or white supremacy? Can we not just shorten that to one word that kind of encompasses the whole
Just
thing?
do what they admit they are in private. You know what I mean? And do they believe it? I don't know
If I
how many
change it to
rallies I've been to with fucking torches. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I feel like I would really have to believe whatever that cause was to show up with fucking
show up with a
torches.
torch.
You know what I mean? I don't show up at all. Not gonna show up with hardware. Yeah, okay, I gotta fucking be down.
Yeah. I don't know. It's. Do we need a 6-syllable word to describe something that's already happened with 2 syllables?
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like this.
Yeah. I believe in a separate ethno-state where this is this, and just geographical. We just want our own. Like, shut up! You're a fucking Nazi.
Yeah, like,
Like.
like I know what you're talking about. You know what? Like it's just
Because I've been there, done that. I've heard all
Yeah.
the same rhetoric from guys in fucking, like clan outfits or, brown shirts or whatever fucking outfit they're wearing. You're just a fucking Nazi. And that's it is what it is. No matter how much you try to whitewash it, you can wear a fucking suit. You can call it whatever the fuck you want. You're fascists. And so, I don't know. I don't think that being an anti-fascist is a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like, this entire conversation has illustrated why fascism is a bad thing and why being an anti-fascist isn't a bad thing. Or wait, double negative. Why being an anti-fascist is a good thing.
yes.
Yeah.
Too deep. Cannot know.
Jesus. Yeah. Because
I get into a lot of arguments online with people that are anti-immigration and a lot of stuff that they like to bring up when they want to seem more reasonable, I guess, would be, we need to limit our numbers because of mass migration. That's a big one that gets thrown around. But they can never define what mass migration means. They just know that the numbers right now are too high. like, how can they be? We have 37 million people in this country, and the last year, I think there was like 350,000 people that got let in. So we're talking about a less than 1% population growth, and that's mass migration.
That's mass migration.
You know what I mean? So
that
okay,
Have you ever driven to Winnipeg? There's room.
there's room.
There's room for people.
There's there's a lot of land. And then the other one that they bring up is, you know, the reasons for people coming here. Economic migration is not a good enough reason. And I think, why not? You know,
Starving?
yeah. And then we have people from Saskatchewan going to Alberta all the time for work. That's an economic migration.
Yeah.
So if it's okay between provinces, why isn't it okay between countries? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I tattoo guys from the Maritimes all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have lots of people from there that come here for work. And the other thing that I find a lot of people don't understand how the system works either. And I guess, like, I've had the inside track to knowing the refugee side and then also the immigration side. So the core group of my family came here as political refugees, but then everybody else that we've known from the Hispanic community has been, well, some of them still refugees as well, but a lot of migrants, right? And so when they talk about that, they want to make sure that the right people are coming in. Our immigration system is actually tougher than the US's is. And people either don't know that or don't talk about it. They have to go through, you know, you have to get background checks. You have to make sure that you either have a job when you come here or that you are able to acquire a job when you come here so that you're financially sustainable.
Our Lebanese barber knows more about Canadian history than I do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Omar told me
Yeah.
some of that shit because we got our haircut done by the same guy.
yeah, he's awesome.
He's like, "Oh, I'm getting my citizenship. I'm super excited." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, what do you got to do?" Holy fuck. He's like,
Yeah.
"I have to do a language test. I have to fucking know Canadian history. I need to know all this stuff." I'm like, "Oh, man, I wouldn't be able to be a Canadian." Let me be a Canadian. What do you know about our country? Fuck all. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The huge thing for so many of my family members and like people that we know was
Sorry,
getting
I'm
their
just
Canadian
thinking, like, all you
citizenship.
gotta do is get raw dogged by somebody in North Battleford.
That's it.
There you
and
go.
you get it.
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
hey, that's it.
I'm married in.
Yeah, broken
Welcome to the
condom in
family.
fucking Prince Albert. I get right through the whole thing. You gotta do backflips through hoops while reciting the fucking national anthem.
Yeah, well, I think they need to know every single word of the national anthem and like,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Like,
Everything, like how our political system works, like all of that stuff.
So yeah, like,
Yeah, getting a Canadian citizenship for like everybody in my family and, you know, friends of the family and stuff like that was a huge deal. It was always like a major celebration. They go down to City Hall that day, it's a big ceremony, and then afterwards we'd have like a, you know, barbecue or a picnic and celebrate.
so no wonder these people have more interest in being Canadian than like they're not trying to ruin the country
Who
or
you call
ruin the
these
culture.
people?
These people. Well,
you people,
one of the biggest arguments I hear from the right is they're going to bring their values and culture and upset our traditions and our culture. And then I like to contend, like, our country is, what, 100 years old? What fucking culture?
Right.
You know, poutine? That's French. Like, come on. Like, what culture do we have? Hockey?
Beaver
Beer?
trapping.
What?
Beaver trapping.
Well, whose is that? That's indigenous, isn't it?
Oh shit.
Right? Like, so what culture, what is Canadian culture? Like, oppressing people and shoving them into camps? We don't want to give that up? Like, fuck off. Like, it really blows my mind. I love buttered chicken. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
Chinese food. I like Mexican food. I love all of the... To me, Canadian culture has always been multicultural. That is what Canada is. It's multicultural. I went to school with people of all stripes. I dated people of all stripes, you know, and I'm not going to fetishize people, but, you know, I find women of different cultures beautiful in individual ways. You know what I mean? And so it really blows my mind. What culture are we losing? What traditions are we losing in North America? Fuck
which again,
off.
bring, you know, the whole ethnicity thing,
Slave
right? If
owning
you're
in the
ethnically
States.
Canadian, does it matter if I'm first generation Canadian as opposed to, you know, third or fourth?
Or,
like-
you know, 60th in indigenous cases. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, right? Like-
yeah, we're Canadian. Who
Yeah.
the fuck are you?
And even right from the outset, like you said, now you look at, like, if somebody's a white Canadian, they're just a white Canadian. But when Canada was first formed, there were very, very specific, you know, delineations between, are you German, Scottish, you
Ukrainian,
know, like,
Irish.
exactly, all of those things. And for all intents and purposes, 150 years ago, those were different races as well.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well, and there's
So-
still lots of communities, even in this province, that are Just a bunch of French people living there. Just a bunch of German people living
Yep.
there. Just a bunch of
Mennonites.
Ukrainian people living there.
There was I found an old newspaper clipping of would have been in the early 1900s, I think, when there were apparently too many Mennonites coming to Saskatchewan, and so the government at that time wanted no more Europeans. Saskatchewan is for Canadians only. So even back then, they were discriminated against white Europeans because they were still from a foreign country.
Oh, so what
like-
you're saying is there is no racism.
Racism made up thing. Well, and that's the thing. So I was arguing with this Nazi online one time, and of course he's not a Nazi. He just believes in an ethno state. Okay, cool. So I'm already arguing with this racial ethno state guy, and
Again, sorry to interject,
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, if it's an ethno state,
which ethnicity?
yeah, because again, for all intents and purposes, you and I are the same ethnicity. You know what I mean?
We're from the same country,
In-
born in the same place.
in every way that it actually matters.
Well, values dictates my tribe. I've said this before. Values dictates my tribe, and if we do not share values, I don't give a shit what color you are, what sexuality you have, where
Yeah.
you're from. If we don't share values, I think that's where it really boils down.
Yeah.
If you think sexism and rape and I don't know, child molestation or any of that stuff is cool, we don't share values, and that's what it really boils down to.
Yeah,
now.
you can't sit with us.
Yes. Well, maybe we can unpack it, but
Right.
I don't think we're going to be able to. I think those are going to be irreconcilable differences.
So that was at the last election. Actually, they're bringing it back in for the next one. That the Conservative Party wants to do some values testing as part of their immigration platform.
Oh.
And again, I'm like, that already exists. It already is part of the the questionnaire that you have to fill out.
Well, it's our legal system.
And it's the legal system, yeah.
Yeah.
But then I was like, okay, if we want to have a values testing, can we implement it across the board? You know what I mean? Like
For locals, you
That-
get
yeah,
deported if you don't follow these
exactly,
values.
yeah.
Right? If it's how you're supposed
If
to
we-
live
yeah,
in this
if we all
country,
have to
you need
follow
to do
the
it to
same
get
values.
in.
Right?
What are the repercussions? You don't get to live here.
You get caught fucking putting hateful shit on the Pride place or on out Saskatoon. Oh, you're deported.
Yep.
Sorry, you don't share our inclusive values.
I'm thinking iceberg. We start iceberging people. Right?
Well, Australia was founded as a penal colony.
Yeah,
there you go.
And look how great they did with their
Let's
indigenous
get
population.
penal.
All right. So yeah, that's some pretty fucking crazy shit. Immigrants. They're all trying to take our way of life. Our way of life.
Immigrant punk. Go Bordello.
What else is new?
Listen to Go Bordello.
COVID's up. We're
Have,
tattooing again.
Have you heard about the Weather Underground?
What's that
No.
No.
The combination of words makes me want to know a lot about them, and no, I shouldn't.
Oh, this is it's an old group, but one that I recently discovered because I don't even know how. I spend too much time talking to socialist people online and
That's the problem.
looking at
You're just looking for that confirmation
looking for
bias.
that. No,
He's trying to
I'm
get on
kinda like you.
a
I
baker's
do
dozens of
have,
watch list, say.
I do have a pretty big. Yeah, I try to limit my echo chamber. I try and get a lot of information from all sorts of places.
But I see you heckling the right a lot.
Yeah. Yep. It happens. It happens. I feel like, they come by it honestly. I come by it honestly. They're speaking their minds. I'm speaking my mind. Usually, if I can tell that somebody is trying to engage in good faith, then I will too. But if it looks like they're just shit posting, then I will just.
So back to the weather underground.
Yeah. So it was basically. They split off into two factions where one of them went very militant and the other one was trying to do recruiting.
So what was it? So like an organization
Yes,
from
a
what,
very
the 60s?
in the U.S. during the 60s, and one of their big things was that they wanted to sort of rebel against the imperialism of the U.S. And one of the main things that they kind of latched onto was the Vietnam War, and so the militant side ended up deciding, if you're going to take your wars overseas, we're going to bring the war to your doorstep. So they bombed some Capitol buildings and some police stations and did stuff kind of like that.
It's called terrorism.
That's called terrorism.
Yeah.
That I'm not on board with.
And these guys were your cousins?
No, they're not allowed in the U.S. The other section was trying to do recruiting in universities and trying to partner up with the Black Panther movement and basically just form a new left, which would be very socially progressive and kind of fight for all of the things that we believe in, basically. I'd kind of like to bring that back.
Yeah, I don't like to be involved with anything that's associated with terrorism at all. I don't like to be associated with anything that could be defined as terrorism. iPhone.
So we do a new thing.
It's making me uncomfortable this even exists now.
This is the one that didn't get
I haven't
released.
put it up yet, and
podcast
I'm
isn't going
already
anywhere.
just sweating.
Well, you know what? I tend to side with the non-violent. Like my values of my Buddhist values go in hand with a principle of ahimsa, which is non-violence.
Okay, yeah.
The most profound protests I've ever seen was the self-immolation of the monk protesting the Vietnam
Lighting
War.
themselves on fire.
No power over anybody but himself, but he took that ultimate power as a protest. Mahatma Gandhi, you know, like they're putting bullets or guns right in his face, and he's like, I'm not gonna kill, do anything but hurt. You know what I mean? That's a powerful thing. What they used to do in the 60s was the sit-ins. You're doing passive resistance. You just
Right.
fill an area, and guess what? There's 1,000 people in a square, and you're going to have to drag every one of us out. And we're not going to help you. We're not going to walk, but we're not going to resist. It's going to take 4 of you to carry one of me out of here, or more, depending.
Yeah.
And how many people, how long is that going to take to clear out 1,000 people out of a space? That is a functional protest. Nobody gets hurt, ideally. And if anybody does, it's an oppressive regime hurting innocent people.
Yeah.
That, to me, is functional protest. I don't necessarily think, well, and that gets media attention because these people are not hurting anybody.
That was one of the big tactics Martin Luther King used to use, putting kids on the front line.
That's what Hamas does too.
In a different way.
Well, I'm just saying, it's a tactic. It's a tactic.
Well, and I think a lot of people think that with that concept too, that they're like, well, anytime you want any little old thing changed, you just go and fill a building with a bunch of sitting people. And it's like, no, you'd have to have enough people that are pissed off enough about something or passionate enough about something that they know it needs to change, that they're going to go and fill a whole fucking building full of people.
These riot or the protests. Now imagine instead of like they have to sit, you just sit down. You got 5,000 people blocking a
standing,
street,
right?
and you sit down or you lay down. And now the police, what? They're going to pepper spray you. Cool, that's going to suck, but they're going to have to drag you away. You're not walking. You have to be dragged away. And they have to do it to 5,000 of you.
Yeah.
How many people? You're not rioting. You're not screaming. You're laying down.
Be
And-
water, hey, fucking Bruce Lee.
Breathe
Right? They're
be
coming
water.
hard, be fucking soft.
Yeah, exactly. That's fighting fire with water. Fighting fire with fire just escalates. But if you're laying down saying, I'm going to be peaceful, and somebody pepper sprays you, kicks you in the head, and beats you with a stick for doing that, who's the villain? And that is the real message, because they can justify getting screamed in the face. You throw a rock at them, they have a justification for hitting you back. If you shoot them with, you throw pepper spray at them or you bear spray them, they got a right to escalate that. But if you are absolutely nonviolent, that's my aspect of this. Comedy, right? You know, they like ideas.
I was just picturing the escalation of that to like you throw a running lawnmower at them. You know what I mean? Like, you throw a running lawnmower at me.
Shark fight.
Yeah, exactly. I come back with a radioactive shark.
Changing hearts and minds, right?
Well, that's these conversations. That's part of my whole trip. Like this, people ask like, "What are you doing for your community?" And I'm like, to be honest, I could be out there and I could be feeding people at Friendship Inn, and I do some volunteer work with like getting people sober and trying to get kids out of gangs. But I think conversations with dudes, changing dudes' minds and opening to ideas that are alternative is more activism than pretty much anything I can do, really. You know, being another person with my fist in the air out of 5,000, that's one thing I've done, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely the new literature, and I think that's important. So when you asked a long time ago, we should organize against the I don't even want to be involved in that conflict, you know. The screwdriver shirt would allow one of those guys to have a conversation with me because he thinks I'm an ally, and then I'm like, hey man, have you ever considered 13 words instead of 14 words? Wow, I never thought about that before, man.
Yeah.
And I've actually had skinheads like Nazis come in to get tattooed that I've talked out of getting that racist shit, and they got more subtle stuff that now later thanked me that I never let them get that raunchy shit. And I think that compassion element and that ahimsa, the non-violence, is the way to go with this.
Well, especially because you know from first-hand experience how people get recruited. So the majority of that book you lent me,
Christian Piccolini?
Yeah.
Is that his
yeah,
name?
that sounds right. Yeah,
White. Oh, no. Is it White American Youth? Or,
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he was the head of the Hammerskins in
Yes.
the U.S. and like a bad Nazi. Like,
yeah, from like 16 to 22 or 24 or something. And yeah, that was like one of the most violent groups in the U.S.
For the video, I'm going to look up his link. He's got Twitter, and he's that book. He now heads an organization, kind of like a railroad to get guys out of radicalized white extremism.
Yes. Yeah, he does a lot of work. Yeah, getting people out of that. But, you know, very well from your experience and the way he talks in the book, that people aren't going into this because they want to hate.
Any radicalism.
Yeah, any radicalism.
Yeah, it doesn't
across
even
the
matter
board.
if you're a Muslim radical or, you know, a white nationalist or even hardcore leftists. They see something wrong and they're just recruited by somebody with an agenda.
Yeah.
They're looking for foot soldiers.
Yeah. Or they have some kind of hurt that they're trying to
Heal.
Yeah.
Gangbanging. It's the same deal.
Same thing. Yeah. Yeah. So then these organizations find, you know, these marginalized youth, and same kind of thing, right? Let's take your hurt, your fear, your confusion, and we'll channel it in a very specific way.
Yeah, manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And like you said, that can be somebody taking, you know, the Bible, the, you know,
American flag.
the American flag. Yep.
The fact that people have a visceral emotional reaction to somebody kneeling during a national anthem because they have it so closely linked with their personal identity and their dead relatives that have died in wars, and the propaganda makes them think that these wars were righteous fights for freedom. Holy man. Like, you guys need some real education.
Yeah.
Not just the propaganda being spoon-fed to you.
And I think that works into the whole, you know, like patriotism versus blind nationalism. If you're going to be a patriot, then that, to me, that means that you love your country the same way that you would love your mom, for example. This is your motherland, right? And your mom can be flawed, but you still can love them. You know, they can have trauma, like internalized trauma, that you can still want to help fix.
But ideally, you want a healthy mom.
Ideally. But that's still, it's already there. You know, that came before you did. So, you know what I mean? Like,
Well,
when
you fix what you can where you can.
Exactly, yeah. But that doesn't mean that you just, as soon as somebody says anything negative about it, you say, well, fuck you. No, this is perfect.
One of my most frustrating things, and I know because I deal with it myself, we joked about it, I don't like criticism from people I don't know. People don't like criticism, and they don't like their ego boundaries being pushed, because especially when you identify with something, it becomes part of your ego.
Yes.
So I identify with my occupation. You say something bad about tattooing, I am now offended personally because that is me that
Right.
you're offending.
Yeah.
So these nationalists and these patriots to different degrees identify with their national identity as being part of who they are. And if you challenge their national identity, or you criticize, not even challenge, criticizing is challenging. If you challenge that principle, or you criticize that principle, you are now attacking them as an individual.
Yes.
And they will respond like they're being attacked with violence, with aggression, with, you know.
Yeah, I think that also part of that comes from a lack of understanding of doing any kind of introspective work and realizing, like, being honest about who you are, so that if somebody is challenging you, you know, where is this challenge coming from? Is it from an honest place? If you're challenging me, I'm going to try not to get defensive, because I know that it's coming from a good place.
If it is.
Yeah. And
What
then
then hurt
is the
is the
challenge
ego self-reflecting.
Yeah, but is the challenge warranted? Right? If somebody is saying something negative about Canada, what are they saying that's negative? Is it valid? You know what I mean?
That's that's it. Is something that you perceive as a criticism a valid thing that you just have an emotional reaction to? You know, I think you mentioned this where, oh Jesus, I forget the situation. But basically, it boils down to, am I really hurting you, or are you just offended?
Right.
You know, and if I criticize your country, I'm going to get beat up for that. You know, or if I criticize like our foreign policy, does that mean that I deserve to be attacked? I don't know. I don't buy that.
And then why are you criticizing it? Are you criticizing it
for a valid
just because
reason?
you want to bitch, or because, you know, you have an investment in making it better?
Do you care about a better world at all?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why, I don't have a problem with people criticizing this country, but as soon as I hear, like, the whole Wexiters start talking about, well, if we don't get our way, then we're going to separate or whatever, I have a very hard time not just having a knee-jerk reaction of, get the fuck out. You know what I mean?
Go ahead. Try it out.
Well, I will drive you to the nearest airport or to the border.
Well, they think that they're going to get that land back, those Western separatists. But what they haven't figured out is they have to renegotiate those land rights with the indigenous people.
Yeah.
It's their land.
It is.
There's a lease on it. There's treaties for a reason, you fuck nut. They haven't figured that out. You know,
Yeah.
we're separating from Canada. Cool. Then it goes back to them.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of Indigenous people that were like, okay,
Sounds
let's.
good. Get the best part. Steal BC.
All right.
You got anything else on that list?
Well, I got so much. We could go for days. We could go for days. Toxic sexuality. What's toxic sexuality?
Sexuality.
Well, like, you know, toxic men. What's a toxic man?
Oh, I think somebody that just goes into the toxic parts of masculinity, right? Aggression,
Stoicism to the point of
stoicism to the point where
castrating your
you're.
emotions.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, that's a big one. Yeah, and it starts right from when you're a kid. You know, like I know for myself, anyways, being, well, I mean, as young as I can remember, my dad's whole thing was, no, you need to be a man. There's no time for childhood things. Showing any kind of emotion, right? You need to lock that up. You want, you start crying about something, I'll give you something to cry about, and out comes the belt, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, right from an early age, it's like, okay, stifle, stifle, stifle. And all of a sudden, this stuff starts, manifesting itself in really bad ways.
Well, that's indoctrination on how to be a man.
Yeah.
And so how can you be a better man when your only training was how to be a toxic man?
Exactly, yeah.
There
and
is
that
this,
stuff, it starts coming out in, well, in all kinds of disastrous ways, right? Homophobia, I would say, is one of them. Womanizing would be another one. Entitlement, yeah, absolutely.
Objectification.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't get me wrong, I love women, and I've got a history, and I'm unpacking a lot of that. But that being said, I'm at a point in my life where I respect people as human beings with like complex emotions and opinions and stuff like that. Yep. Not just something to stick my dick in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that's like you talked about Arrested Development. That's a fucking profound Arrested Development when you look at somebody as just like, how can that benefit me?
Yeah, how is this going to give me pleasure?
But that's a system of colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a colonial mindset. Like, how does this benefit me economically? Where's my profit in this engagement, right?
Yeah.
There's this, I'm not sure if it was an experiment or just something that researchers noticed with a group of baboons, right? And all of the alpha male, like aggressive baboons ate some toxic kind of garbage, which they wouldn't let the other guys eat, and they died. So the young male baboons were raised by the aunts and the grandmothers and the mothers, and what ended up happening is there was a generation of men that never learned to attack and bite and to tear hair out and to be those guys. They ended up being preening and grooming, and like all of a sudden there was this new generation that were this new group that was non-confrontational, and the societal culture in this little like group of baboons changed. Yeah. And then what happened was the other adolescent males came in with that old conditioning, but it was made very clear by these young ones that have been raised that wasn't going to be accepted.
This isn't our way.
In this environment, that shit doesn't fly. And you just
literally, because that's how they communicate. Flying shit. That shit doesn't fly here.
You go away. And I don't know how they would deal with
approach.
it, really. How would you...
Gentle.
If you're not aggressive, how would you deal with the aggressive baboons coming in? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But
were they not aggressive in the sense that they're just not always looking for fights, but they'll still check somebody?
Or just nobody will talk to you?
Yeah, ostracized.
You do that. No. You go to try and mate. No, I don't want nothing to do with you. You go try and be buddies. I don't want nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And slowly you either become passive and like join a civilized society. That's basically it. Competition being the law of the jungle, and cooperation being the law of civilized culture.
Yeah.
Right. If you're not willing to be civilized, you want to be a throwback and a beast. I don't like to say animals because I like animals, but when you take it down to a point of being a bestial thing,
yes,
then if you want to be a beast, you go be a beast over there in beast land,
on the bestial level.
Yeah.
It's a society overhaul though. I know, like for myself growing up, like I said, my dad was gone by the time I was like 7 or 8, and every interaction before that had been a negative one, and then after that
I can't relate.
Right. Exactly. So then after that, I'm being raised by my mom, my aunts, and my grandma. Mm-hmm. And they're basically trying to raise me to be the type of man that they would want around. So, kind of the same thing, but then that's not
Was tall one of the requirements? Like, when you can have a man around, we need a fucking
gotta be
tall
tall.
one. Tired of not being able to get shit that's on top.
And gentle.
Long arms. Yeah. Could carry groceries.
But then society is telling you, no, that's not a man. A man is something else.
And how do you learn about sexuality and what a man's role is in society without, well, any real input? You know, from a point of trauma, I found sexuality was my what do they call it, panacea. Like that was one of my drugs. It's like this is giving me a dopamine release. This is giving me a sense of self-worth. This is giving me a sense of, you know, belonging and love. Something that appeared as love and belonging, even if it's a few hours, and I want that as much as possible.
Yeah.
How can I get that? You know what I mean? Just like any other addiction, right? So I think young male sexuality is now being twisted, written by porn, you know, in a lot of ways, written by toxic examples of what masculinity is. You know, the connectivity isn't there because women aren't comfortable educating men on sex.
That's why there needs to be more of these types of conversations.
Yeah. How to give head. How to get head. You know? How to properly get head. You don't have to be doing like the
Dusty
gagging.
wasn't ready for that one.
I just feel like this is the sort of thing we were supposed to be like, if we're conscious of what we're talking about, you know.
Well,
yeah.
Oh,
we're
were there
focus on
topics that we're not
sexuality
supposed to
more.
talk
No, not at all. Not at all.
You know something
But yeah,
crazy?
no, I just think it was funny that your first thing was like, yeah, like, you know, getting head. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's the first angle.
Well,
Giving head as well.
Well, that's what I first led with.
Yeah,
Gotta
exactly.
give
my
better
bad,
head.
my
Jeez.
bad. Yeah.
But-
Yeah, sorry, you are a gentleman. My bad. That is correct.
But you know, putting these conversations on the forefront and actually having an open dialogue with partners, with other men. The women I know are more detailed when they talk about sex, like how, when, how big, where, you know, how wet, how hard, like that kind of stuff, cut, uncut. What, guys don't do that. You do that thing? Yeah. How was it? Good? Yeah, good.
I honestly think it's creepy if a guy comes in with too much detail.
See, and
you know what I
that's-
mean? When they start like really detailed like physical attributes, I'm like, fuck, dude, just paint the picture. You know what I mean? I don't need an HD.
But that's
broad
kind of
strokes.
the thing. Broad strokes, because guys want the broad strokes, not the details, but women want the details. And I think we need to meet somewhere in the middle. You know what I mean? What women want, what men want, and working out our implicit expectations of dominance that surround all of that, right? I've got a right because I'm the putter inner versus I don't have rights because I'm the taker inner. You know, that kind of weird stuff. And our implicit attitudes towards giving and taking, you know, meeting in the middle. What is this something you want? How do you want it? Right? Where do you want it?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And like you said, that's
there's
stuff's on
options.
us to, you know, talk to the next generation.
One of those build your own destiny kind of books.
It is. This whole thing. And you know what? This entire stuff that we're seeing in society with like the increasing polarization, I really believe that what we're seeing is the shift in that baboon tribe. You know what I mean? You've got a bunch of, well, even the ultra-right, they're like, oh my God, it's Marx and communist in the colleges and all these kids are coming up, they're lefties. Well, man, there's a generation of men that ditched their families, you know, and they were raised by single moms and they're now coming out of colleges and they're getting jobs in like, you know, authority roles and that old guard.
Educated and raised by women.
Yeah, they read books, you know.
Well, it's funny how there's always a correlation to that. There's like these schools are liberal breeding grounds, or people get educated and then their views change.
Yeah,
or
there's a bunch
develop.
of deadbeat dads that didn't want to step up, and like a generation of kids didn't have fathers that had to figure it out on their own, and they're coming. And I really believe that we're seeing a real hold on tight to the old system that's just not going to hold itself.
Yeah.
And we talked about that with Christianity, where there is this dominant masculine hierarchy of dominant heterosexual families.
Yep.
But that's Abrahamism across the board.
Yes.
It is. You see it in the Muslim communities. You see it in the Judaic communities. And I guess those are off limits to talk about because nobody wants to be perceived as being an anti-Semitic or an Islamophobe.
Right.
But these are valid structures. These are male-dominant structures.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole supremacy hierarchical thing, right?
Then everybody loves white supremacy.
God is at the top. And
So did you say everyone loves white supremacy?
Well, as being the villain. It's white supremacy. It's not white
It's
supremacy.
just supremacy in general.
I would like to say it's
I can-
Abrahamic indoctrination, but that's
agree.
just me.
That is definitely a bigger problem. I just don't think people love white supremacy.
Oh, it's a very convenient. It's a very convenient villain.
Getting them sound bites in there.
Well, I think in-
Hey, stop misunderstanding.
At least
me.
in the Americas,
everybody loves white
that's
supremacy.
the dominant one.
Anyways, everybody loves it. No, but that's the big villain. But that's the thing when okay, I got in a debate with a guy who was like, we need to fight these Muslim values of child abuse and like clitorectomy and
Right.
stoning women from coming here and homophobia and all of this stuff. I'm like, dude, cool. If you're anti-homophobe and you're anti-sexism and you're anti-child abuse, what are you doing in our culture right now to fight those same values?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm fighting Islamic immigration. That was his fucking answer. And I'm like, yeah, bigot. Thanks. You're a fucking Nazi.
Yeah.
And quit trying to jump around it.
That evil is already inside the house.
So to me, I think those structures are colonial structures, but people tend to forget that colonialism has been an Abrahamic colonialism. It's a mindset of God's chosen people and everybody's under that, and it's usually God's chosen men and everybody underneath that. You know, you look at the Hasidic communities, there's a couple really good documentaries and shows on Netflix that basically show you how like the ultra-Orthodox like Hasidic Jewish communities are very, very misogynistic. They're very, very fundamentalist like religious. Same thing with the Sharia law and all of that. Or the Christian ideas. These are all Abrahamic ideas that rolled over the indigenous, more ecological societies. So I don't know. That's a frustrating one with me because we live in a system in North America and Europe that's male dominated and white supremacist.
Yep.
Now you go other places in the world, it's male dominated and other ethnicities, right?
Yep.
So yeah. I digress. Sorry, went off on my anti-Abrahamic tangent there.
I love it. I love a
Valid,
good tangent.
So, to what degree, as men, do we need to be educated by other people, and how much do we need to discuss amongst ourselves what's going on? I see a lot of what I'll say liberal white people speaking for the Black Lives Matter movement instead of listening to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
Should we have representatives coming in and telling us how we need to be, or should we examine that on our own?
I definitely think we need to be doing a lot of the homework ourselves. I don't think it's fair to put it on somebody else to educate me.
Well, should we be going into marginalized communities telling them how to fix themselves?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. So I'm willing to discuss with other people that are interested in progressive ideas how we can become better men.
Yeah.
But do we need to have other people coming in and telling us how to be better men?
Well, that's what, like, you need to do the homework yourself. Like when this whole Black Lives Matter stuff started, 2 weeks ago? That it just like it blew
Just
up.
2 weeks ago.
Fucking
It hadn't
insane.
started.
2 weeks ago?
No, it lasted longer than. It's been around a
This
while.
current-
Unreal.
But that explosion with it, right? I immediately was just like, okay, my voice doesn't need to be heard during this. I'm going to amplify the voices that do need to be heard. So instead of, I'm not going to post any of my own, thoughts or opinions or whatever on this. I'm just going to post stuff that I'm getting from other people that are in this movement right now that do need to be heard and, share their stories and their points of views as I'm learning, as I'm going through social media and as I'm picking up books so that I can educate myself on this and then, spread that awareness kind of around. And yeah, I think it's on us to go out and seek that information as opposed to expecting somebody else to teach, unless you're going to pay for it, unless you're actually going to seek out an educator that is what they teach. Like if somebody was to come to you and say, we want somebody that's going to teach about kink community, as opposed to just saying,
Or any of the plethora of things I'm an expert on.
but that's something that you educate on. That's something that you educate on.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but should you have to do that labor for free?
Well, okay, so this is a tough one because there's a lot of people that are coming from like what I like to call the ivory towers of academia that like to roll down on us plebeian,
Yes.
Toxic men and tell us how you need to think. This is how you need to do it. And to some degree, I'll listen to what they have to say. I read bell hooks and I've gotten ideas for my own self-work, from these authors. But when somebody rolls down to my community and tells me how I need to be a better human being, how is that different than me rolling down to somebody else's community and telling them how they need to parent their children or how they need to be doing that? Why is it specifically the Karens or the systems of white supremacists
Yeah.
that are the villains for telling other people what their morality and how they need to be?
That's not the marginalized community, though. That's the dominant community.
Is
Telling
not the suffering,
marginalized
damaged
community.
man a marginalized community just because we've got a position of power? Maybe, like, you know, and that's just it. The fact that we've been abused into a system and we've been emotionally castrated and our sexual values are all fucked up, aren't we victimized by that same system?
Yeah, it absolutely does victimize us too.
Yeah.
That I'm pretty sure it was James Baldwin who said that the man is the first victim of patriarchy.
Oh, that's bell hooks.
Is that part of
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe he said something similar, but yeah, she said that the woman isn't the first victim of patriarchy. It's
Yes.
actually the man who had to be emotionally castrated in order to take part in these male rituals.
Okay.
And whenever they stepped out of that role, there was always a man willing to force them back into that role.
Yes. Yeah, that's the exact quote I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's a bell hooks one, and that hit me so profoundly when I heard it. I was just like, boom. You know, I was never allowed to cry. Don't make that face in public. You know, don't dance. You slam dance. You do martial arts. Don't write poetry. You write hardcore lyrics. Don't do art. Don't paint. Don't be like flowy.
Yeah.
You tattoo.
Yeah.
So my entire life.
Yeah, what's the most like
Aggressive
masculine,
and
aggressive
macho
way you like make art?
Hyper masculine caricature, you know, that's the thing, and I realize now in my mid 40s
Chainsaw curve.
how damaged I've been my whole life by being forced into that system, right? So I know to the average person, you're not a victim, right? You're not a victim. You got privilege. You got this. You got that. But I think it's pretty fucking obvious that I never fit into mainstream society.
Right.
I was like always into the subcultures, and anybody that's actually probably interested in this stuff is in the same boat. They were forced into a subculture. I debated with that white nationalist guy. I got sidetracked, and he's talking about his ethno-state. And I sent him a picture of a church and of Starbucks and a soccer mom and Ugg boots and, you know, that white Christian happy family. I'm like, this is where you want to live? You know, this guy's a black metal, like hatred, like, whoa. And I'm like, this is the state that you want. These are the people. This bland mayonnaise, white bread, Wonder bread fucking reality. This is what you want to live in? Because that system never worked for me. Right? That's colonialism. That's functional colonialism, right? And I think that I've been a victim of colonialism as much as anybody else. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have to unpack my participation in it and my privilege and how my white privilege or male privilege or, you know, educated privilege or financial privilege, we're all part of that. And one of the most frustrating things that I've found, and I don't know, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, the people that drop the term check your privilege usually are coming from a very privileged economic point of view where they were able to use that language. When the people I knew who were addicts and junkies and criminals and, you know, on the streets were too busy surviving to worry about somebody else's privilege. It took a certain level of education up here to be able to say, you're privileged, right? So now I'm kind of there. I can say these words. I can examine that shit because I'm not forced to struggle to survive, right? So, I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah. No, I do agree, though. That goes back to the whole, pyramid of what you need, right? Once your needs are met, then you can finally start to address those things under it.
And is that an age thing? But some people never get there.
No, some people never get there.
Yeah. And I think the system is made. So think about it, right? These celebrities, millionaire celebrities, these, whatever they're called, billionaires, they got all the time in the world to play whatever games they want and to, you know, either become degenerate or try to enlighten themselves and save the world and blah, blah, blah. Luckily, I'm a punk rock tattoo guy that was able to start a tattoo shop and, you know, I can work part-time and pay my bills. Thank you. Because in the main time, I can meditate, I can do my self-work, I can heal. And I've had enough emotional breakdowns that I needed to fucking heal. And a lot of this stuff comes from those breakdowns. But so do you, right? Like you can largely make your own schedule and you can, you know, do that stuff. Walk your dog, spend quality time with those you love. Now, if I was up at 5 in the morning and grinding till, you know...
Oh, yeah, you don't have time to start reading the books that you want to read and, you know, acquiring that knowledge. And even if you realize that there's something broken inside of you, when do you have time to get the tools to fix it?
And where do they come from?
Yeah.
Right. See, yeah, who knows? Or if you're too impoverished and you don't even have to go to work, you're just struggling to survive and to like not get, you know, shot or whatever the case may be, right? You're not going to go to school. Harpooned, shark fights.
Dodging harpoons.
All right, I think we're running down on our time here. Otherwise, We're close to 3 hours. Oh Lord.
Damn, that went by fast.
I know. I figured this was going to be a long one. You gonna come back? You gonna visit us again?
Yeah, we'll see if anybody's interested in me coming back.
Oh fuck! This is a long one.
I,
It's ADD culture.
yeah, no, that was a delightful experience. Well, what?
You meant that, right? It wasn't sarcasm. Yeah.
Where can people find you on social media if they want to check out your tattoos and see some of your work and
Oh,
what you're
dear.
up to?
Instagram. I have no idea what my handle is. Nope, I don't know. Maybe I can link it.
Isn't it your full name? If
I think.
If you search that, you want to say that after some of the things you've said today. I don't know.
Yeah. If you want to check out my artwork,
ROPtattoo.com. You
Yeah.
go to ROPtattoo.com, you can find Jose's tattooing.
There we go.
and if you like my opinions, I'm also on Twitter.
Yeah. And what's that?
I think it's Jose1 Pino, the number 1.
Pino?
Yeah.
Oh, now you're flagged.
Like if I wasn't on the list already, I definitely am.
Yeah.
Operation Complete.
Yeah. Bad ideas, good stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if this whole project of the podcast is just another one of those bad ideas. But fuck it, let the chips fall where they may. We'll talk about what we talk
But
about.
fuck it, indeed.
But fuck it.
That's what you said.
You said it. All right.
Okay, so yeah, I guess that's where they can find you. Us, still Facebook, Spotify, Vimeo,
Linktree.
iTunes.
What is it? linktr.ee /Biggs podcast is the link tree that you can find all of our stuff being posted.
Get it all up from there.
Yeah, we're working out the
Yeah, keep putting them up.
put them up.
Exactly. I don't know what else I got. Nothing else for wrapping it up.
All right. Well, thanks for coming up, Jose.
Thank you for having me.
This was a
Hope to see you again because we could do this
And,
a few more hours.
Yeah, man. Cool.
Peace out.
Bye.